Call this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors to order for the purpose of a business meeting. Mr. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
All present.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask for a motion to amend the agenda in order to add an additional presentation by Verizon and to withdraw item number 12 from the consent calendar.
So moved.
We have a motion. Mr. Stevens, please call the roll.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're here with a pretty full agenda of items, or at least it looks that way. A lot of that is on the consent calendar, but we have some interesting presentations as well. And we have an important presentation right at the very beginning where we will be making some presentations to folks who have served the county so well in a number of different capacities. So I'm going to go down to the podium for this purpose. And so over the years, we have called on our citizens and staff to volunteer to work on boards and commissions that serve the community in important areas of environmental, social service, planning, economic development, a whole series of areas where we really rely on the expertise and the commitment of our community members to make this a better place. We haven't in the past taken as much opportunity to recognize the service of those who are completing their terms in various capacities, and so wanted to start doing that this year with the presentation of certificates of appreciation to those individuals, and just to give some public recognition to you as well for the job well done. I know everybody that is leaving boards and commissions were not able to be with us today, but for those of you who are, when I announce your name, if you wouldn't mind coming up to receive your certificate, and then we'll stay up here so that we can get a photograph of everybody at the end of this process. I'd appreciate that very much. Okay, so let me begin with Sally Andrews. Sally is completing several years of, 8 years of service on the Williamsburg Regional Library Board of Trustees. William Apperson. Mr. Apperson, I think it indicated that he was hoping to be here, but family emergency prevented that. Mr. Apperson has served for 20 years on the Chesapeake Bay Board and the Wetlands Board, protecting our environment and addressing regulations for uses in our waterways. Teresa Christian. Teresa, are you here? No. She served for 4 years on the Colonial Behavioral Health Board, helping to address the behavioral issues of our community in that capacity. Bob Gasink. Bob served for 8 years on the Stormwater Program Advisory Committee, an increasingly important committee that addresses a significant environmental issue in the community as well. David Gussman. David's not here, but he put in 23 years of service on the Chesapeake Bay Board and the Wetlands Board, much of that as chairman of the board, and we appreciate all of the service that he provided as well. June Hagee. June served for 12 years on the Colonial Behavioral Health Board. And I'm certainly not going to criticize anybody after putting in all that time for not being here today. Theodore Hiller. Mr. Hiller served for 4 years on the Williamsburg Regional Library Board of Trustees. And we have Thomas Hitchens served us for 15 years on the Agricultural and Forestal District Advisory Committee and 4 years on the Stormwater Program Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, Mr. Hitchens passed away earlier this year, and we will make sure that this certificate goes to his family. Max Lavin. There he is. Max, who served in a very distinguished capacity as our Deputy County Attorney, is here to receive recognition for serving for 3 years on the Community Action Agency Board of Directors. Max, thank you very much for being here. Thanks. Stay right here.
You got to stand
Appreciate
up
that.
here.
Okay. Adam Kinsman. Adam has served for 6 years on the Colonial Community Criminal Justice Board, and Adam, of course, is our county attorney. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So he had to be here. He came all the way from Richmond to be with us, so let's make sure we recognize appropriately. John Kaplinski. John served us for 11 years on the Colonial Behavioral Health Board. Julia Leverins. Julie served James City County for 4 years on our Planning Commission, one of the most important, challenging positions that we ask our citizens to take on. Julie, thank you so much for everything you've done. Christopher McDonald. Chris served for 5 years on the Social Services Advisory Board, helping to provide guidance for the needs of those who are in need of social services for us. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Josh Moore. Josh served for 3 years on the Social Services Advisory Board as well. Stephen Phillips. Stephen served for 6 years on the Historical Commission. Patricia Russo. Patricia served for 3 years on the Social Services Advisory Board. We have Carlton Stockton. Carlton not here. He served for 4 years on the Economic Development Authority. Scott Van Voorhees. And Scott served us for 7 years on the Thomas Nelson, now Virginia Peninsula Community College Board. Rebecca Vinroot. Rebecca served for 12 years on the Colonial Behavioral Health Board. Linda Wallace Cody. Linda served for 15 years on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. And Heidi Wallace. And Heidi served for 3 years on the Social Services Advisory Board. Okay. With that, if I could ask the board members to come around, we'll just take a photograph of our volunteers for the commitment that they've shown. Again, thanks for the service for all of those who are recognized today, and special thanks for those who were able to join us today. It's just great to be able to recognize the commitment and motivation of folks to serve the community with their free time, or to make free time to do it. We also have a presentation today from Verizon. A number of our constituents have raised questions about the level of service that's been received recently and some of the changes that appear to have occurred, and we just hope to be able to help answer some of the questions about what has been going on in terms of service delivery and what we might expect to see in the near future. The gentleman representing Verizon today is Mr. Matt Ogborn. Mr. Ogborn, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today to discuss service issues in the county and also our recent VADI broadband grant application together. My name is Matt Ogburn. I'm a Director of State and Local Government Affairs for Verizon in Virginia. First, I would like to thank you, the board, your staff, and especially Patrick Page for your partnership in the recent Vadi broadband grant round. Verizon, formed in 2000, was the first company to build a large-scale fiber broadband network, now serving over 6 million customers. While we are a Fortune 20 company, almost 7,000 Verizon employees call Virginia home, including right here in James City County. Our team has a combined decades of knowledge building and engineering fiber projects. In total, this project will be about 40 miles of fiber, will be constructed to over almost 800 unserved and underserved addresses. In total, the project will cost nearly $4.1 million, with Verizon contributing 60% or $2.5 million. The remaining $1.6 million is what the grant application is for. We've requested Vadi broadband funding for the rest of the cost, bringing the passing to just over $2,100 per passing. Last year, the Vadi grants that were awarded, the average amount was around $3,500. So we believe that our application this year with a $2,100 cost per passing is very competitive. Verizon has a long-established supplier relationships for the components needed for the project. For example, on average, Verizon builds out to more than 400,000 premises and over 5,000 fiber miles per year. This project easily fits within our current build plans and our proven supply chain relationships. With our experienced in-house workforce, long-standing contractors, and reliable supply chain, Verizon is ready and prepared to rapidly build out this project within the 18-month time frame once awarded. Just some dates upcoming for that timeline. October 13th, challenges to any plans submitted are due by October 13th, or will be communicated back to the applicants by October 13th. We will have until November 3rd to rebut any challenges to our application together. And then the final awards will be announced sometime in late December. As the build is ongoing, our team will be in constant contact with you, the board, and your county officials. As the progress of the build continues, and as the build is ongoing, fiber that is passing a premise, that household will then have the opportunity to purchase a broadband internet plan from Verizon. During that time, Verizon plans to partner with county officials and you, the board, to get out as much information as possible as where the build is ongoing, and including information, marketing materials, all that will take place, normal marketing to try to increase get the word out about the project. But in addition to that, we will partner with the county to get out as much communication as possible, especially in the project area, to make sure folks know what's going on and what new broadband services will be available to them. The other thing that I will note, that Verizon is very proud to participate in the American Connectivity Program. For those of you that are not aware, this was a new program passed during the pandemic by the Biden administration that gives a subsidy through the Federal Communications Commission to needs-based applicants. So for example, if someone is already on SSI, food stamps, if they're at a school, if they have school-age children that participates in a free and reduced lunch program, these needs-based qualifications would allow them to participate in the American Connectivity Program. What that means is that they can go online, apply. We can also help them through sign-up events, apply, get a certificate from the Federal Communications Commission that they can then bring to us and get $30 a month off their plan if they qualify. The other great thing about that is through our partnership with the American Connectivity Program, we have reduced our lowest cost FiOS plan, which is 300 megs up and down, so very fast, high-speed internet, to $30, making it free to the customer. And when I say free, I mean free. There is no taxes. They do not get a bill. There is no hookup fee. We provide them a router. We make this as easy as possible for them to get a free service subsidized through the American Connectivity Program. Through our outreach, we will also be working with the county and county officials to make sure that those populations that might qualify will be targeting information to get the word out about the ACP program to make sure that they know that they qualify and can take advantage of this wonderful program. The last thing I will note is Jason was kind enough to pass out my business card to all of you. I am your point of contact. We will probably have another point of contact in addition to me during the build if we're awarded in December for operations and logistical questions. But for that project, for service issues in the county, you have a constituent that calls you, you need help, call me. I am your one-stop shop for anything Verizon that you may need to help you and your constituents and the residents of the county. I have relationships within the company where I can get things solved quickly, whether that's a wireless issue or a wireline issue. I work very closely with my colleagues on both sides of the business in Virginia, and we have access to higher levels of customer service to make sure that if somebody does reach out to you with an issue, we can get it solved quickly and make sure that they are happy and your constituents are happy. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
I do have one, if I may.
Absolutely.
So the grant program you're talking about, is that a federal grant?
So it's funded by federal money, but it's going through the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. So it's a state program. So we, as Verizon, joint application with the county to a state program. It's under DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, that runs the VADI grant program. So it was ARPA money that came down, and then the General Assembly allocated it to the VADI program. So there are federal guidelines we have to follow. It's federal money, but it's a state-run program, and so our application is to the state.
Does it benefit us to contact our representatives on the state or federal level to help facilitate the grant?
So Patrick put together a list of endorsements of our application that included your local, your state representatives and other representatives in support of the application. Since it is a competitive process that is graded and calculated by staff at DHCD, I mean, it certainly couldn't hurt, but I'm not sure it would necessarily help. I'll put it that way.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Ogburn, thank you very much for coming and providing us with all this information. One of the things that we would be very interested in hearing about, a number of our constituents and some of us personally have experienced dark spots, dropped calls in the middle of conversations, gaps in that conversation in our Verizon plans. Is there an explanation for that, and what can we expect to see happening in the near future?
Sure. So the issue that I was made aware of recently that happened, the explanation there was that it was an upgrade to some of the equipment on the towers. And so the service, there was a signal loss for a short amount of time. But when I talked to my colleagues and got a response back to them of what was going on, they said that the upgrades have been completed and that the service gap should be not an issue, at least for that particular issue that was made aware to me. But as far as, if there's a gap in the county, if there's another loss of service, what we can do is offline, we can have a separate meeting. I can get you in touch with our wireless operations folks that have this area for our company, and we can update you on if there's any expected more upgrades coming, if there are any new towers planned in the area, and we can provide you more information on that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate us
Absolutely.
setting up a meeting of that kind, because I know personally I experienced two instances yesterday where in the middle of conversations the phone just went dead for several seconds and then came back on again, and so it did appear as if there was a problem of some kind or another.
Absolutely. And one thing I will say, if there's a certain instance like that, we can look into that particular instance. So again, you have my contact information. You have a constituent or you yourselves say, hey, I had a dropped call here. What might be going on?
Mhm.
Let me know. Well, I'll get a little bit of information from you. I'll get it to our wireline team. We do constant checks and quality checks on our network to make sure it's running properly. Um, so if there's something that is amiss, we can send technicians out to the field to make sure everything's working properly. Can send technicians out to the field to make sure everything's working properly. Or if it may just be an area that we don't have a tower nearby. But whether it's one explanation or another, I'll get you that explanation.
Thank you. And
Absolutely.
the other question that I get all the time from constituents is about FiOS and whether
Yes.
you have any plans to expand into the county.
So the broadband grant program, this is FiOS. So
Okay.
for all 700 some addresses that will be as part of this project, that is FiOS. So they will have fiber to the premise, our FiOS product to available at their residence. I don't know exactly how many addresses in addition to that 764 with our project at our own cost, not at the county's cost or Vadi's cost, as we pass other premises that are not part of the scope of the project. There will be additional residents within the county that will be getting access to FiOS as we pass their residents. Um, like I said, since that's out of the scope of the project, since we're only applying for funding for those 764 addresses, that will be totally at our cost to bring additional customers into our FiOS program. Um, and from
But there's
there,
no plan currently to bring segments of the county in outside of that
not that
program?
I'm aware of outside of this project.
Any other questions?
I was just going to say, I think it may be, it sounds as though that you all think that it's completely fixed. And we are still hearing from people that and I'll take me, for instance. I've been a long-time Verizon customer. I usually have had no trouble. I pulled over the other day on a road that I'm typically on, and I was trying to actually go on the internet on my telephone to make an appointment. Nothing. And I mean, it wasn't until I got home and could go on my internet at home that I was able to make that appointment. I was not able to use my cell service. And I know that that's what I'm hearing from constituents, is that there's just all these dead zones that they've never had issues with. So, I mean, I'm happy to reach out to you every time, but it does seem as though there's a disconnect between what you're being told by your corporate office, which I appreciate, and we're actually experiencing here. Because this is, I think, my 7th year on this board, and I've not, I mean, the typical you get about Verizon or Cox or whatever the various different utilities are, but we've just been inundated with people that are very frustrated. And as you know, a lot of people have dropped landlines and they depend solely on a cell phone for that emergency communication. And so it's quite serious if there are continuing issues. Um, so, I mean, I can, do you want us to forward you the email that we get that, when someone, or does someone need to tell you that on Tuesday at 1:24, I was on 199 and my call dropped? Or what kind of information are you looking for when we send you information?
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Larson. So, just to reference one of the first things that you said, the issue that I was speaking to earlier was a larger outage within the county that was due to some of our upgrades. If there are ongoing issues, please send them to me.
Okay.
Like I said before, I am your point of contact. If I am here to help you serve your constituents. I used to be a legislative aide in the state Senate. I'm very used to helping constituents. It used to be part of my job. So
Okay.
please use me as your resource for anything Verizon related. You get an email from a constituent, forward it to me. We'll do what we can to make it right. And as far as information you asked, the easiest way to put it is the more information, the better. Cell phone number, time, place, If they have, if they can provide us their account number, address, so we can look up their account, identifying information like that, so we can look up their account, is better for us, so we can look up the information within our network and help identify that issue. But if there is, and it's happened before, I mean, local supervisors called me last week in a county in Southside, Virginia, and there was a widespread outage, and it was because a storm came through and it fried one of our chips on that tower, and so there was an outage in that area for a short amount of time. We addressed it. That whole area is back up and running. So it could be something like that. An antenna could be pointed the wrong way. Our engineers are equipped with our network information to make sure that they can identify what the problem might be. If there is a problem, I will say it could also be that we just don't have coverage in that area. If there's not a cell tower, there may just be weak coverage in that area, and then we can communicate that to you as well. If just for the expectation for your constituents, but if there is a problem, we can identify it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Matt, I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
And I'll say the same thing the other board member said, that the coverage used to be great and it's not now.
Huh?
And we've added towers. So I don't think it's a tower thing. It's almost like the system's overloaded and can't take anymore.
Sure.
And so it's and I hear it from a lot of people. I'm on the phone, as the rest of them are, quite a bit, talking and going over stuff, riding through the county. And it didn't used to drop, but now it's dropping. So it's not an area that, by Camp Perry, you're going to lose a call. You know it, you're guaranteed it. And, or there's going to be fuzz or something in that area. That's just part of life. I mean, we know where that is. But these other areas are new. With the broadband, is that going to be fiber, or will it be satellites, antennas, or how will that be transmitted through the county?
It is a fiber build. It is direct fiber to the premise through so we have a central office in, I can't remember whether if it's one or two central offices that serve James City County, but that's where our copper line is, and DSL, where there is DSL in the county. So we're basically going to transform those central offices into full fiber central offices. I think, as I said before, it's about 40 miles. So 40 miles of fiber will be put underground or aerially in the county, where we'll be building out to all of those addresses. So it'll be our normal FiOS product, fiber to the premise.
Now, I know in the central part of the county, we're pretty well covered. The outer parts, down in Grove and up in Lenexa and the upper part of James City County, we're not covered as well. Are those areas you'll work on first, or can you tell us where this fiber 40 miles will go to, or somewhere within where it'll be at upper end of the county, lower end of the county, middle of the county?
Yes, sir. So it's actually a little spread out throughout all of the counties.
Okay.
So the goal of the VADI program is to achieve universal service within the county. So that way, every single one of your residents has service within the county, whether that's through us, Cox, or another competitor. So we've identified 764 unserved or underserved, which means they might have service, but it's low speed service that doesn't meet the guidelines for high speed internet. So we are building out fiber to those addresses. It's a little bit up north. It's along the river. There's a few spots in the middle. That's why it's a 40-mile build, because it's pretty spread out throughout the county. So I'd be more than happy to set up a meeting and show you a map, the maps that we sent along with the application, and kind of show you where those addresses are, and we can go through it if you'd like to.
And I've got a few neighbors down further from me, but with Cox, they could only go so far because it's a 7-tier.
Yep.
Once you get to 7, there's no signal at all. And so they would have to do fiber. But of course, the cost of fiber to get to the other residents is extremely high. So, they're like, it just stops just past my house. That had nothing to do with me, but and it happened to be from the members of this board that saw during COVID, we had children out there, And this board moved ahead and said, hey, let's get Cox to hook up all these children that we can possibly hook up. And it was a great move from this board that made sure that we could get that in place and use COVID money in order to take care of the children that had no internet. And we didn't get all of them, but we got a good bit, and the rest of them would take fiber, and the cost was too high. So hopefully this fiber will reach out to the rest of them that we couldn't get. And because, you know, of course, we're frustrated and all that, but a young person sitting there trying to go to school when we had to do that and get knocked off and knocked off, and it's so frustrating. They're having a hard enough time learning, much less having to be knocked off every time and try to find a hot spot and that sort of thing. I know that you do have fiber in Uncle's Neck and Stonehouse. I think those are the two only areas that y'all serve with the fiber right now. So maybe, and that's Sue and ours area, so maybe you'll come up there and see us.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Yeah, and good luck driving down 199, your call not dropping. Just saying, that's a daily thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Ogburn, I will make it brief. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it. I think what we might want to consider is having us contact you in the next few days and set up an opportunity for some of your folks to collect some of this data and come back and have a discussion at one of these meetings about a month from now. And the reason I say that is because I've lived here for 27 years, something like that. And I've had my Verizon phone, and it's been wonderful. I know where the dead spots are. You know, I live in Forts Colony. You drive out by the pond, you're not going to be able to talk to anybody. You lose it there. That's just a factor of where the tower is. What's been frustrating is not only getting the calls from my constituents, but getting my calls dropped where I used to never have them get dropped. I was trying to speak to our county attorney the other day, and I think it took us about 5 different connections to finally complete the conversation in areas where we never had that problem before. And so I don't know what it is, whether I was under the assumption at the time that you guys were doing an upgrade to the towers to 5G or whatever. I notice when I go around, I still get LTE. I don't get a lot of 5G. I go up Richmond, I get 5G. So I'm sort of curious a little bit about finding out where we have what kind of coverage or service in the county. So it may be beneficial to have your folks at the technical level come give us a little more of a presentation where we could talk a little bit, maybe in a month or so, because I haven't seen this go away. And I think we just need to keep after it. So, but thank you for coming and being the point of contact for it. And we'll get you the information and the details.
I appreciate that. Yes, as much information as you can give me as far as where and when it occurs, that will help our team pinpoint what the issue might be. And like I said, there might be a tower that's not performing up to where it needs to be, and we can address that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Again, thank you, Mr. Ogburn, especially for bringing us the information about some of these new programs and opportunities that we're bringing to the community.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move on to the consent calendar, and we have a number of items on the consent calendar today. First is to amend the term of alternate appointments to the Chesapeake Bay and Wetlands Board in order to bring it into sync with state code. Authorization of full-time solid waste director, contract award of $266,000, Chickahominy Riverfront Park well replacement project. Grant award of $25,466 from the Department of Motor Vehicles for speed enforcement. Grant award of $19,585 from the Department of Motor Vehicles for alcohol enforcement. Grant award of $68,180 for Kinship Navigator Program. A grant award of $30,497 for pre-release and post-incarceration services fiscal year 2023 expansion. Minutes from a number of recent meetings. Official intent to reimburse expenditures with procedures from borrowing. We have an item on remote participation policy for board members. Supporting operation green light for veterans, And I think the last one is Settlers Market. Item number 12 was earlier removed. So anybody wish to remove any of these items from the consent calendar? And if not, do I have a motion?
I don't wish to remove any. I just want to say that there are several in here that I mean, all of them I think are good things, especially the speed enforcement, alcohol enforcement. The Kinship Navigator program, I think, is so important because so many relatives take on the responsibility of raising children that are not, they're not their children, but because they don't aren't the foster parent, sometimes they don't get all of the support, and so I just am so appreciate our staff going out and getting these things done and bringing them before us, and also supporting Operation Green Light. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Stevens. We heard about this at NACO. I think it's going to be really cool, especially in this area where we have a lot of veterans, and I just really appreciate you supporting this, and I'm really excited about it. So with that, I can move the motion.
Great, thank you. Motion to approve the consent calendar. Ms. Stevens, please call the roll.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have a number of board discussions today, and there's been a request that we move item number 5, update on the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan, to the beginning of our discussion. So with the board's indulgence, I will call on Tammy Rosario. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Over the past year, James City County, its consultant, Ms. Karen Firehawk of GIC, Inc., and the Natural and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee have been developing a natural and cultural assets plan to conserve and protect the county's natural and cultural resources. As shared with the Board of Supervisors in previous meetings, the natural and cultural assets planning effort has been a multi-stage process of first mapping and modeling the county's natural and cultural resources, then assessing the potential risks to these resources, and more recently, identifying opportunities to conserve, protect, or restore them. I would like to recognize the work of the Mapping Committee, a citizen advisory committee that was appointed by the Board of Supervisors in October of 2021. The Mapping Committee members represented each district of the county, as well as various organizations and groups tied to natural and cultural resources, and gave considerable guidance during each stage of the process. Mr. Jay Everson, one of our committee members, is here with us today. Also instrumental in the effort was the Technical Advisory Committee, comprised of county staff from various divisions responsible for stewarding the county's natural and cultural resources. Members lent their expertise to the analysis, suggested strategies, and helped publicize the effort to their affiliated committees, commissions, and citizen networks. Last but not least, I would like to thank the many citizens who gave foundational input during the Engage 2045 Comprehensive Plan, which led into this effort, as well as those who gave suggestions for assets to add, revise, or delete from our maps during our February survey, and the many members of the public who attended our June community open house or completed our online survey regarding the recommendations in the plan. All of these elements and contributions have been captured in the draft Natural and Cultural Assets Plan that was included in the packet for the board's reference. Ms. Firehawk, the county's consultant on this project, is here to make a short presentation on the plan for feedback and questions prior to it coming before the board for formal consideration on October 11th. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today, and also thank you for your forbearance with my schedule. I have some other public hearings this afternoon where I have to sit in your seat. So with that, I'll get started. I have a few introductory slides. I know that you full well know about the project. This is for just members of the public who might not be familiar, so I'll try to go as quickly as possible. All right, so I'm going to talk about just a reminder of where this project came from, the process we followed, some of the mapping work we did, the wonderful community input that really informed where we got to today, the plan strategies, and then the next steps. So the project origin came originally from the 2035 strategic plan and was an outgrowth of affirmed community priorities, also established during the update of your 2045 comprehensive plan. So it's come up a couple of times. And it was really noteworthy that prioritizing the protection of natural lands and open spaces was the most highly ranked and supported objective across all 3 rounds of community engagement. And just for members of the public, I did read all of those reams of documents about community engagement. So we really mined that to get up to speed on what the community was wanting. And so this is the process to complete Natural and Cultural Assets Plan to meet the Comprehensive Plan Action Environment 3.1. That's a mouthful. So there's a lot of benefits for conserving natural assets. So we'll start with those. Just biodiversity and wildlife habitat, that's an obvious one. But also conserving working land such as farms and forests that contribute to the economy. So natural assets include your strong agricultural soils that you have here in the county. Protecting and preserving water quality and supply, so helping to recharge our aquifers and our wells. Providing cost-effective stormwater management and hazard mitigation. Hazards are much on our minds as we see a hurricane barreling towards Florida. So knock wood that we won't get one anytime soon in James City County, but as we have these buffers against storms, it does help. And then improving public health, quality of life, and recreation networks. So this is very much about improving the health and recreation potential for people who live and visit here. So we went through sorry, I went backwards. I drank a lot of coffee on the way here. So I'll try to go forwards and not backwards. Sorry. So it's a 6-step process, setting your goals. As I said, we use the comprehensive plan update to inform a lot of that. The next step is to gather data. So we not only use your own existing data, but then we also created new models and maps. So we actually created new data for the project. Creating maps to understand where everything was located and its relationship. Then looking at risks. I call that a little bit the so what phase, just looking at what might change. So some things are in great shape and don't need any action necessarily, and other things might need some planning in the future. And then determining opportunities. What are the things that James City County could undertake to actually achieve some of the goals? And then finally, implementation, which is where we're all moving towards. So a lot of this work will just be information used in everyday planning. When you have a development proposal, you might look at the map. If I'm a community member and I'm thinking about managing my land, I might take a look at the map to see that I have some important resources on my property. So it's both a daily and a long-range planning tool. So how did we evaluate these resources? We used a lot of different data sets. Like I said, there's data about where wetlands are located, but we also used information from satellite imagery and then processed that imagery to understand what's happening on the landscape, what's going on where. But all of this work to bring in these high-value natural resources helps us with recreation and also supports cultural and heritage values. So places such as historic buildings, that setting is very important to them. Also archaeological resources, battlefields, historic sites in Freedom Park and other places. So the landscape also supports the interpretation and appreciation of those sites and is also part of the history. And then, of course, I would note that while we did map quite a few heritage and cultural resources, I feel that every week James City County is discovering something new. There's still much yet undiscovered, so it's our hope that you'll continue to be able to update these maps. And we've given you all of the data and the base map. So Kim in GIS has that information. You can continue to make these a living set of maps. And so we tried to look for the most intact, largest landscapes. And so we evaluated areas that were at least 100 acres in size. So if it was a marsh that's at least 100 acres, or a forest that's at least 100 acres. And that number comes from just supporting biodiversity. There's been a lot of studies showing how much habitat animals need to survive and thrive. I keep going backwards. Sorry, I'm not used to doing a mouse for a pointer. All right, so some areas, of course, have been developed since we started the project, and also just at the very beginning, we're using data that was flown from a particular time. So we did work with county staff to remove areas that are already slated for development so that we wouldn't put something on a map and then next week someone was building on it. We went through the effort to try to look 6 months ahead so that we could have a practical, more realistic map. And then we also look at how corridors across the landscape help connect these areas. So the more species can move, the healthier the landscape can be. And then also people might move across that landscape as well. So the first map you see here is the intact habitats. Those are those large chunks of habitat. And the ones in the sort of neon green are ones that not only provide habitat, but also supported a significant number of cultural and recreational assets. So we kind of gave them a little extra pop of color to just remind us that those are also serving double duty. And then looking forward to another type of natural asset is, of course, your agricultural soils. And I did a little zoom in because it's hard to see all the brown at this scale, but this is the highest value soils that are best for crops. And that data comes from USDA, but we also added ag forestal districts, as well as some of those pick your own spots where you maybe could go collect the lavender or fruit, or what I call pet your own, where there's a llama farm, you can go pet the llamas. So the more of those types of elements you have in where you can visit a farm or appreciate it or experience it, the easier it is for those farmers to stay in business because they're realizing extra revenue. So it's called agritourism, but we want to also emphasize it's helping keeping farms and farming. And then forestry, this is showing areas that are large enough to be timbered potentially. In other words, they're at least 30 plus acres, so it could be ongoing. You could plant it, harvest it, plant it again. That's ongoing instead of one and done cut. So it doesn't mean that all of these areas should or would be timbered, but just that you have significant land that could be used in forestry. And then water. There's not a lot of edits to this type of a map. Water is where it is, but we did add at the request of the county, not just 100-year floodplains, but also 500-year floodplains. That would be areas that would be inundated with a really big storm. But also these rivers provide important connectors, either for wildlife to move across the landscape, or it could be a future greenway trail. So just being aware of our water resources and our reservoirs. Recreation, there's a lot of great recreation going on in James City County. And of course, outdoor recreation is supported by the landscape. Connectivity is really important also for some types of recreation. So whether you're doing cross-country horseback riding or whether you're hunting, you need to be able to move across a connected landscape, and it's also healthier for the species as well. So connectivity matters for wildlife, but also for people. Heritage and culture. This map took the longest. It seemed like every time we turned around, there was another resource to add. This includes national, state, and local register historic sites, but also includes a place that might not have been designated. So there were a number of buildings where everyone knew that building was more than 100 years old, but nobody had ever nominated it. So we included those data points from citizens. So there's quite a lot of different sites on there. There's also archaeological sites, but we masked exactly. We didn't put the point saying find arrowheads here. We put a little bit of a bubble because we don't want to encourage anyone to poach anything. But it's amazing how rich the landscape is with these sites, and that landscape also supports their interpretation and enjoyment. So I'm sure as you discover new archaeological sites or important cultural assets in the county, you can keep adding to this. And it becomes a really great showcase for all the resources you have here in your county. So moving on, now we know what our assets are. Just quickly to risks, what might change. And I don't have time this afternoon to go point by point through every single map, but we looked at sea level rise to the year 2060. So we looked into the future at what may happen with inundation and some areas that would be challenged by that. We looked at storm surge. So that could be from a hurricane or a big storm. And of course that could affect trees, for example, over time as they get inundated and become weaker and more susceptible to harm. Impaired rivers, these are just rivers that are designated by the State Department of Environmental Quality as impaired. We didn't get into all the different impairments, but it can be for some of those that protecting the landscape around them helps them stay healthy. So we included that as a risk. And then moving on to development. Now, we do have a designated service area where we want people to be building. So that's inside the sort of bold red line there around that. And there are some of those high value habitats within that development area. So it doesn't mean that those developments would not go forward. Of course not. But we might take a little extra care with some of those to just say if somebody has to put recreation on their property anyway for their development, that maybe they would make that recreation area some of that high-value habitat. So it's just a guide, if you will. And then utility scale solar, all Virginia rural counties are faced with the challenge of where to put utility scale solar. We considered it as a risk because there's a lot of lands that companies are looking to put solar on. It's a 30-year commitment, so it's not permanent, but it almost is. And they may disturb agricultural soils. So we saw that as a potential risk. And we used the Department of Energy's map on where they think the best spots are for solar. Sort of flipped that on its head and said, but that could be a risk. So the county, over time, will need to develop some more policies around that. So you can tell companies what you want and how you would like them to design their sites. All right, and so that comes into sort of a cumulative risk map. If you added all of those things together, what would be sort of the areas that were most at risk, and the redder or oranger the color, the higher the risk. So there's a lot of statistics, and I don't want to read these off to you. I know you've read the report already, but we just put together some fast facts and statistics about the county. We've got about 92,000 acres. 12,800 acres of that is in water or wetlands. 44,000 of those acres, though, are in those high-value habitat cores. So to let you know, what does that mean? That's really good news. You have a lot of really exceptional habitat here. You have 550 miles of streams, and I just asked our GIS analyst team to tell me, well, how many of those cores, of those habitat areas, are within 0.1, a tenth of a mile to these resources? And they said 59 of the 60. Then I asked, well, how many of them have rare species in them? How many of those habitats are protecting rare species? All 60 habitat cores. So by protecting these areas, you're also performing a service for protecting water quality, for helping rare species survive and thrive, and also supporting culture and recreation. So I'll move on from that. I want to get to the strategies as fast as I can. Community input was fairly robust. Ms. Rosario already thanked the members of the committee, so she beat me to the punch. Thank you to Jay for coming out and supporting this in person. We held 5 meetings with the Natural and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee. And then we also held public input sessions. So all of our meetings were open to the public, by the way, but we also made a concerted effort. We had an online survey in February of 2022, and then we also did some physical mapping stations. Not everyone wants to go online and drop points on a map. It could be intimidating. So we also had stickers where you could go to the library and put a sticker on a map. So we collected all of that data together to understand what some of those important points were. And then we had a community open house on June 29th, and we ran that concurrently with a online participation option as well. There are a few people who did the survey and enjoyed it and decided to come to the open house, so we asked them, did you do both? That's okay. You can vote early and often in this game. But we did get a lot of good, rich comments also from the online survey, and then people also called and emailed us as well. So we kept all of those comments, 150 of them, and we used that to inform the strategies. And then county staff, as Ms. Rosario said, already served on technical advisory committee, so they helped make sure we weren't duplicating things the county was already doing with our ideas, or also pushing us to look deeper into some issues. So people had a chance to vote. We had a column of support or don't support. Support was overwhelming at 95%. Now, that's not a scientific survey. It's a little self-selecting. If you came to the meeting, you were probably already interested in the issue. So I'm not representing this as a statistical survey, but people also got a chance to suggest new strategies or comment on existing ones. So it was fun. Some people said, I want to help implement this strategy. So I already have people who want to work on agritourism, are raring to go and excited to offer their property even for some workshops. People also made a lot of comments on their support. I'm not going to read them all off to you in the interest of time, and I know I'm talking really fast. But I thought it was a neat one. Homeowners can be the change for nature by expanding their corridors on their property, and then increase funding opportunities to grow farms and agritourism in the county. So a lot of supportive comments, and those are all found at the end of your report. We didn't edit them in any way. We pasted them in there. All right, so there's a lot of applications for this work, from transportation planning, future updates of the comp plan. somebody who might be interested in a conservation easement might decide to put one on their property when they see they have a high-value resource. Future parks and open space planning, identifying lands for purchase of development rights, heritage tourism or protecting view sheds, expanding or protecting ag and forestal districts, or just everyday land management. So it's a combination of public actions, private actions, or voluntary actions. And so here's an example just very quickly of a potential scenario where you might have some habitat cores and a development site that's just happens to be the parcel straddles two habitat cores and has a stream. And here's a good example where maybe they have a central green and a pocket park, and they might have piped the stream though to try to get that road in where they wanted to put it. But if they were thinking about connectivity, they might do this a little bit differently. Maybe they actually restore the stream buffer along that stream, don't try to pipe it, and actually shrink some of their lots a little bit to allow for walking trails and parks. These type of developments sell faster and for better profit margin, and also provide more recreation amenities. So that's just a design option, not a requirement, but that's just another way of helping the development community think about different ways they might put the same number of people on the land, but in a different pattern. Okay, so let's get into the strategies quickly, and I will try not to give you a headache by talking super fast, but I'll try to get through them. Goal 1, conserve and protect the highest value natural habitat cores and connecting corridors to support wildlife, trails and greenways, scenic vistas, and cultural and recreational values. So each one of the goals, we have 4 of them, has a series of objectives underneath them. So update the Greenway Plan, conduct an education campaign. A lot of people wanted to learn more what they could do. We heard that a lot. Provide and publish design guidance for how people might conserve some of these corridors. Add conservation cores and corridors in your purchase of development rights program. Maybe give people points if their property includes one of those. Use the maps and their value and risk rankings to inform your green space program, park acquisitions, or other plans. And then look at where public park infrastructure might be flooded in the future and might need expansion or repair. So just planning ahead for some of your capital costs. And then this is quite a mouthful, but work with Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation, Preservation Virginia, and the National Park Service at Jamestown, the 1607 Fort and Town archaeological sites on work to protect Jamestown Island. So Jamestown Island consistently came out at very high risk, and a lot of the folks who are part of that landscape are very interested in working with the county to try to figure out what are some of the things we can do to mitigate that and to keep that, not only that heritage resource intact, but also visibility and visitability so people can still enjoy it. Then this has the most objectives, this first goal. Looking at your management plans or master plans for opportunities to improve habitat health and diversity for water quality benefits. Develop zoning tools and guidance for large-scale solar sites. So actually developing that guidance. As I said, many rural counties across Virginia are just catching up, just getting to the point where they realize they need to start developing some guidance. Encouraging landowners to keep their land in forest cover. Encouraging land preservation groups to seek voluntary easements for properties that might have high-value assets. Working with developers to conserve substantial amounts of habitat cores and corridors. Informing your long-range transportation plan. So if you had a road project or an access road, you might shift it a little to one side or the other to try to protect these areas. So there's a lot of ways that this can be used in long-range transportation planning. And then, of course, continue the stewardship of irreplaceable prehistoric and historic sites, landscapes, and standing historic structures in the Governor's Land Archaeological District. And we have a little case box on that in your report. Support conservation protection priorities of the Lower Chickahominy watershed through membership in the Lower Chickahominy Watershed Collaborative. You're already participating in that. I think the county just wanted to say, like, yeah, let's keep it up. Let's keep going with that. All right. And then I just also want to note for members of the audience, we do have specific recommended actions you could take to achieve all these objectives. So they're not just thoughts, they have steps that you might want to undertake. Goal 2, conserve and protect high-value ag soils and historic farms to support your ag economy and continue your agrarian heritage. Include high-value ag soils and maps in the county geographic information system layers and property information, and recommend minimal disturbance of those good ag soils, especially, say, for example, a utility-scale solar site. Facilitate continued agriculture by considering promoting the Farm Link program. That's a neat program that links aging farmers who don't have heirs who want to farm their land with young folks who actually want to get into farming and need a little help. So it's sort of like farm dating, I guess. Promote expansion of existing ag and forestal districts to those farms with highest value ag soil. So you've got that map, you know where your districts are, maybe doing some outreach to those folks who have the highest value soils. Create a tourism route. So this is back to that agritourism point I made earlier. And a lot of people like to have apps that they can go on their smartphone and just find spots easily. Keeps people in the county longer, spending more money. Create educational opportunities and host a workshop on agritourism. So there's a lot of steps to develop successful agritourism on farms and to have an economic workshop to help people work through how to do that. All right, and then, of course, for AFD renewals, think about maybe whether some of those terms might be lengthened. That's something the county looked at in the past. You might look at it again. Okay, goal 3, facilitate voluntary planting projects to extend the width of vegetative buffers to serve as wildlife corridors along the county's waterways and to protect water quality. Educate landowners, homeowners, and neighborhood associations on the importance of healthy vegetative buffers. Partner with the Virginia Department of Forestry to plant stream buffers along streams and prioritize those that serve as connectors. So on our first map, we actually showed you some of those really important corridors that are connecting those habitats. The Virginia Department of Forestry needs to plant 44 million trees in the next 3 years. They are desperate to find places that they can offer free trees and help with planting. So the time is ripe for doing this kind of work. Our governor's already acknowledged we won't make our 3-year deadline, but let's at least go as far as we can and keep going. And then seek an increase in the county's community rating system points. So you already have a really excellent score for your community rating system, which affects your flood insurance rates. But we did, when we worked on this similar project to this, except urban in the city of Norfolk, we actually got them to lower their points yet again by using this plan. So that might be something to think about. Prevent stormwater impacts from utility scale solar by adopting stormwater standards as the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality is currently requiring. So that's something you're doing. It's just a yes, keep doing that because those panels can generate a tremendous amount of runoff. And we've seen some really terrible erosion problems happening when you have just acres and acres of hard panels. All right, we made it to goal 4, and it's not got the most objectives. Promote biodiverse landscapes to improve habitats within the built environment. Update the county's existing code for street trees and new development. So we're getting now into like subdivisions and neighborhoods level scale. But what we're looking at is updating the code to specify biodiverse street tree plantings of at least 5 different species of street or yard trees to be varied at the block level. So in a whole block, you would have at least 5 different kinds of trees. Why does that matter? Well, if you think about some trees will get hit by a pest like emerald ash borer, killed all the ash trees. Spotted lanternfly is heading our way. So it's really important that you just don't have one kind of tree, because when that pest comes, it can wipe out all the trees. Now, it's a pretty simple change to make. Review the recommended tree and shrub list to ensure it includes suitable species by location. So an example of that would be a red maple tree. Does terrible in a parking lot, but it's pretty, so people keep putting them in parking lots. You would just tell them, nope, put it in a yard, it'll do great. Don't put them in parking lot islands. So it's a really simple step you could take. Promote the use of native plants in planting projects. So that had a lot of citizen support. So as you're doing projects around the county, just try to use native plants. Okay. So I want to make sure I didn't forget anything. Nope, good. All right, next steps. So happy to hear your review and comments on this plan. We gave it to you as a Word file. The final plan will look much prettier than that. This is not typeset. This is me at my desk. I'm no graphic designer. We have one. So once we know that we have the right content, we'll move on to full design. Any changes will be made before your second reading. So I've already blocked out all day tomorrow should I have that amount of comments that I need to get in there. And then, of course, as I said, it'll be graphically designed. And then following the adoption of the plan, publish it and publicize it and build the various strategies into budgets and work plans. So one of our committee members also wanted me to say that it's important to note, and it says in the text, that this plan is not free. So we did include some grant sources you might want to consider applying for, but it will still take staff time. Even a grant that you administer takes somebody on staff to pay attention, make sure deliverables are met. So it'll need to be built into various work plans, and you'll need to think about what your timetables are. And then long-term, we hope that you will update the maps and determine progress. So take a look back in 5 or 10 years and see how you did. And then, of course, times change, new issues come up like solar. And so you may decide that you need to do some updates to get it ready. All right, and then continue to enjoy the natural and cultural assets of James City County. So it's been my pleasure to perform this work for you with my team, as well as the members of the Natural and Cultural Asset Mapping Committee. I look forward to your comments. Tammy Rosario is the staff contact on this, as you know. So you can also funnel comments to her as well, but open it up for questions as well as comments you'd like to make.
Well, thank you, Ms. Firehawk. Why don't you take a breath and we'll, ask if board members have comments that they'd like to address to you or questions?
I liked several of your suggestions, most especially the landscape drives me crazy because I see pine trees, not that we've done, but like VDOT will put by roads, and then we get a storm and they snap. And so then we have cleanup and impassable. But also landscaping that we've done before, I get frustrated. So, and I was interested in the solar because we get a lot of, and we've got one coming soon. So, but how do you make sure that this is a living, breathing document, that we take what you've put along with the committee and staff, and that it goes from that to let's look at landscape, let's check that off, let's look at getting solar risk and getting a map with that, et cetera.
Well, we'll start with solar. You've already got a map of where those areas are at risk. And then the next step for you to do would be to develop some policies on solar siting, where you'd like to see it and where you don't want to see it. So some counties have adopted guidance for, we don't want to see it in these areas. It's okay over in these areas. So that's ready and for you guys to decide to put that in the staff work plan and say, we're going to work on this in the next year. For the sort of everyday stuff, we had a meeting last week with your GIS staff, and we gave them all the data, and then we walked them through how do you call up these layers. So if community development is going to work on a master plan, and they would call up all the usual street networks and other data that you have, they would also pop this up too. So it will just become part of another set of data that you use when you're making decisions. But also there's some recommendations in there, such as promoting design guidance to developers. We recommended that you might have a web page on your community development site that says, here's what we'd like to see in James City County. So it's promoting it on your website, it's putting it in policy guidance, and in some cases it's adopting an ordinance like diversity of street trees. So somebody will have to sit down and go through those and think about where they belong in your work schedule. We also put short-term, long-term, and medium-term little icons next to each one. So you can kind of see this thing we think you should do sooner, maybe in the next couple of years. This is 3 to 5 years, and this is long-term. It would be good to do, but it's not as urgent. So we tried to provide that guidance.
Thank you.
Noticed in the presentation, we're thinking about going from in A1 from 1 to 3 acres per house to 1 to 20 on the bigger lots. And if you're under 25 acres, we're thinking that would, we would stay with the old way. But if you're bigger than 25 acres, it would change to, a larger lot. And that's got to add to some of this diversity as far as connectivity and that sort of thing. Yeah. I know in the county, sometimes we talk about, in fact, I'm going to have a meeting tomorrow about it, tree canopy. I want more tree canopy and cool the earth and all the things that everybody's talking about as far as a tree canopy. And then there's some projects that we don't want any tree canopy because we want the view.
Right.
And and hopefully this will help some of that, because it can be very frustrating to the citizens. Do you want tree canopy or do you not want tree canopy? and is tree canopy good on this side of the county, but it's not good on this side of the county. And so, you know, I think that, you know, there's a, it's a very fine line on, you know, working with our landowners as far as, I think this would be more of a promotional thing, and maybe in a booklet form that would be, these are some of the items that you can do, or you can apply for grants and that sort of thing to enhance your property, to
Exactly.
make it a better piece of property. And because, you know, a piece of property that's got more value is going to raise more money. And what are the other things that can be done? And I think we could, you know, I don't want to see this as another piece of, oh my gosh, okay, now I got to do this, and I got to do this,
Right.
and I got to do this, and why don't I just give you the land and it'd save me a whole lot of money, you know? And so, you know, and that's where the frustration the citizens have that own any land, and they're going to have more frustration with some of the other things, but and we have to preserve the land. I understand that as well. I love the fact that we have so much land out there in James City County. I don't want to see it turned into Newport News. Not there's anything against Newport News, it's a beautiful place, but not for up here.
Right.
And you know, I'm probably I'll not pick on Newport News. I'm not trying to, but just a city, city say. So I would see this as the county using it not as a, here's another step you have to do. Maybe it's one, here's how we can partner with the citizens that own pieces of land, and it could be a small piece of land.
Sure.
How do I develop my 1 acre?
Right.
How do I develop my 20 acres? Not develop it to build houses or something, to develop to make it a better place for animals and cooling the earth and all the things that everybody's talking about that we need to do. I think the earth cools and heats itself as it needs to, but that's just my opinion. It's just one. But you know, what are the things that make life better? What are the things that make our air better, our water better? And that's what, because we all care about that. And so I think we could probably use this as a learning tool, and maybe put it in a little book where we could give it to owners of, you know, if you want it, you can have it, or we could send it out or something, something to talk about as we move forward on. But
Yeah,
I think it'll work.
absolutely. And there will be, yes, there's a lot of good resources that are out there, but pulling it together maybe on a web page, and you could have a booklet. Yes, there's a lot of ways to get that information out there, because a lot of people did ask, like, well, I own some land. What can I do with it? Whatever that thing is that I should be doing, I'd like to know.
And when I was at the open house,
Yeah.
you know, a couple came to me and we're talking, and they said, okay, we have a bunch of grass. We're taking all our grass up and we're planting it. What should we, I talked to them. What should we do with, you know?
Right.
And so there were a lot of people that were interested in, how do I do something, even if I only have a small piece, how do I make a difference?
Absolutely. I mean, there was a butterfly picture in the slideshow. I took it right outside this door.
Uh-huh.
So even just at the county office building, you've planted pollinator plants to just do your little part, you know.
Right.
So there's a lot of people just even if they have a little scrap of land, they like to do something positive. So that's a major recommendation in here. It talks about providing education for people, like, what can I do? And the title of it could be called "What Can I Do?"
Right.
with a bunch of easy steps that people could take. Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? So one thing that I'm wondering about, Ms. Firehawk, first of all, thanks very much for all the detailed work here, for these maps, for all of the information that this is going to provide us with. And I see the real benefit of what you've done so far, and really sort of showing us where we are and what might happen if we're not careful about the way in which we plan in the future. I do wonder about the question of how we could measure progress or lack of progress at the end of the day, and whether there's some ways for us to be able to identify some measurable outputs that would suggest to us that we're doing what we need to do in order to protect these assets.
Sure. So I answer this in two parts. One part is that the recommended actions that you could take to implement these objectives, you literally could go through this plan after you've created a work plan and then say, we did that, we did that. So achieving a lot of these things that are in here will go a long way towards protecting those assets that we just showed you. The second part of that is whether you want to actually create some benchmarks, like our future vision, and this could be in a future comp plan, or you could do it sooner. We would like to see at least 50% of those high-value resources still on the land by the year 2050 or something. We were kind of discouraged from putting hard numbers in this document, so I didn't, but you certainly could.
Right, and I think, I understand that, because I think that does require a fair amount of consideration and discussion, and it's probably beyond the scope of what you were called in to do in this case. But I guess the question would be, not just, can we say that we accomplished those objectives, but did achieving those objectives produce a particular outcome that we were
Yes.
trying to get?
Well, one thing that can be done is you could pick some year into the future, and it would. I think it should be long enough that you've had time to make a difference. But maybe it's 10 years from now or 5 years from now, you could actually rerun the model that we built and see where you are. You literally could. We did this for the Richmond region, for example, and looked at like New Kent County. Here's where they were in 2000. Here's where they were in 2007. What have they lost? What do they need to do differently if they don't want that pattern to continue? So it would be not too hard to rerun this and look at how you're doing, what's actually on the landscape.
Okay, thank you.
Because this is a snapshot in time. This is the last few years, but in the future you can actually get real data that's completely objective to say what's left. How did we do?
Anybody else have anything?
I just make a comment, and it's
Sure.
not necessarily a question. It's because it was a good point that you made. This is a document. It's a snapshot in time. It's like we have a lot of documents that we try to use. Some we use fairly effectively, some we don't. And ultimately, it all comes down to this board when we do land use decisions. We look at the comprehensive plan. We've had some watershed plans. Again, watershed plans are snapshots in time. We're in the process, pardon me, we're in the process of going back and relooking at them. And we're finding, in some cases, and we don't know what the ultimate outcome will be, but one of the first snapshot was that we were a lot worse off than we thought we were going to be at that point. And so it's these snapshots in time sort of tell us which way we're headed. The difficulty for us sometimes is, and I think this falls more on this board and our staff, in utilizing these documents in evaluating land use decisions. Because if we evaluate land use decisions in isolation and then every 10 years go back and say, boy, we sure messed up over the last 10 years, it's a little too late. So I think it's really incumbent upon us to try to work with staff, recognizing these snapshots in time are not inexpensive. There's a cost associated, but it's the best documentation we have that we can utilize to make rational decisions that preserve what we want to preserve in the county. So I'm pleased with the document, and I'm glad you mentioned that it is a snapshot. How we utilize this and how we update it is going to be something that I think we need to think long and hard about.
Absolutely, and I know you didn't pose it as a question, but I will just respond that that's why we had the staff advisory committee working lockstep with the Natural and Cultural Assets Committee, so that staff were learning, hey, I could be using this as I'm working on park master plans. I could be using this in another master plan that's coming up, or a decision about zoning I might make down the road. So this is really, we have to put it in a document and have some steps you can take. But the data is already in your GIS system. It's already going to pop up. And I think that we've challenged staff to say all the different ways that you could use this in planning. And there's probably some creative ways I haven't thought of yet. But one thing I tried to emphasize in this document, I tried to make things that were actually doable in here. We tried to come up with our committee of strategies that you could do that are not going to break the bank, that are practical. rather than going so lofty that it's a plan that sits on a shelf and it felt good at the time, but nobody ever did it. So think of this more as a living document, a roadmap towards the future. But something else will come up. Something else will come up in growth and development that you need to address that we haven't thought of. And I hope at that time then you'll update it.
I would just like to say we always appreciate our citizen participants with anything that we do in the county. And thank you to Mr. Everson for his active and thorough participation in this plan, and for taking the time to be here with us today to follow it through to the end here, or the beginning, whichever way you want to look at it. So thank you, Mr. Everson, for participating and for being here.
I will extend that thanks to all the other members of the committee as well for their work with you, and to staff for the hard work that that I know they had to put into gathering materials for your consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been my pleasure to work with everyone, and I do believe you'll see some more members of our committee when we have the public reading on October 11th. But, all right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move to the next board discussion item, which is, I'm sorry, emergency management presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr.
How are you?
Chairman, members of the board. We're here this afternoon. A lot of times I get the chance to stand up here and we're talking about awarding contracts for the purchase of some new fire equipment or something to do with fire and EMS. And so Mr. Stevens talked to us about a chance to talk about emergency management. I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of bring that to the forefront. Sometimes they're forgotten about until hurricane season, and then we talk a lot about what Sarah does on a daily basis. So before I start, I just want to introduce, many of you have probably met Sarah or certainly have seen one of the podcasts that she's done with Ms. Dahlman. But this is Sarah Rue. She's our Deputy Coordinator of Emergency Management. On a daily basis, she's our emergency manager and really runs all the daily functions of the program. Also seated in the back is Michael Teener, and he's our emergency planner, joined our team back in September. So I wanted to make sure we introduce both those two. Sarah was recently selected as the Vice President for Region 3 of the International Association of Emergency Managers. So that's new just within the last couple of weeks. So we appreciate Sarah's work on that group as well. So we're going to kind of tag team the presentation. I'm going to talk about a couple things and then turn it over to Sarah and let her take us through what her office does on a daily basis. So one thing I just wanted to cover before we get too far into it was, emergency management is not just something that comes up and we think about it, that's the EOC and during hurricane season. We certainly talked a lot about emergency management during our COVID response, but so kind of wanted to establish what defines emergency management in Virginia, what do you have to do by code, and so I'm certainly not Mr. Kinsman and won't quote the state code to you exactly, so we tried to summarize a little bit, but so the Virginia Emergency Services and Disaster Laws outline a few requirements. One of those is that you have an agency of emergency management, which you do. Sarah's Office of Emergency Management falls under the fire department. We have to have a director of emergency management, and that's outlined in our emergency operations plan. Different localities handle that a little bit differently. In our emergency operations plan, that's outlined to be the county administrator. And then, so we do have an emergency operations plan that comes before the board regularly to be updated and adopted. I think the last one was in 2019. And we also have a documented chain of command, and that is included in the emergency operations plan that outlines kind of that succession plan. And if you remember back during COVID, Mr. Kinsman came before the board with sort of a chain of command and a succession planning for all of our departments as well. So that's something we certainly have done. Localities with a population of over 50,000 are also required to have an alert and warning system. For us, that's JCC Alert, which on the backside is a software called Everbridge. Many of you and many of our residents and businesses are signed up for JCC Alert, and I think Sarah will talk a little bit more later about how to get everybody signed up for that. Because we were within the 10-mile EPZ, an emergency planning zone for Surrey Power Station, we're required to have a radiological response plan, and every 2 years that's evaluated by FEMA and make sure that we're able to respond. And then annually, Sarah completes a LCAR for us, a Local Capabilities Assessment for Readiness. That's turned into the Virginia Department of Emergency Management to let them know how we're doing in our preparedness. So those are sort of the things that the Code of Virginia says we have to do. And then there's a whole lot of other things that we do on a daily or weekly, monthly basis that Sarah's going to kind of cover on what she does when it's not hurricane season. Sarah?
First of all, thank you for allowing us to present today. Really appreciate your time. especially since it is National Preparedness Month this month, September. And Michael and I have been diligently out doing public outreach. And so this forum gives us the opportunity to hopefully reach some other citizens that we might not have reached earlier this month at any of our other events. So just a quick little summary of the office. As Chief Ash mentioned, we are located at Fire Administration. We're comprised of 4 positions, so it's Chief Ash, myself, and Michael, who is in the back, who is our planner. We also have Mike Powers, who runs our CERT, so our Community Emergency Response Team program, and our CART, which is our Community Animal Response Team program, and I'll talk a little bit more about those and what the acronyms mean in a little bit. That position is grant funded, so we do apply for that every year. I'm hoping for good news. Come October, you guys might be getting another State Homeland Security grant to possibly accept to continue the funding for that position. Emergency management. Emergency management protects the community by coordinating and integrating all activities necessary to build, sustain, and improve the capabilities and mitigate against, prepare for, respond to, and recover from threatened or actual natural disasters, acts of terrorism, or other man-made disasters. That's the big overall picture, but what is it really? Really, it's a team sport. We just went over who comprises the Office of Emergency Management. 4 people. 4 people cannot do everything by themselves. Really, it is everyone in the county government that participates, whether it's general services helping to respond and get buildings open after a storm, or Department of Social Services, who helps us with a lot of our sheltering and family assistance center training and those sorts of things, or working with stormwater on some flooding issues. Really, it takes a whole team, and I'm happy to say that in James City County, everybody is more than willing to pitch in. When we ask any of the departments for additional support or help with a project, we always get it, and generally it's an enthusiastic yes to move forward and help with the preparedness in the community. Emergency management is an ongoing process. We have several circles. This just happens to be one of it. We prepare, we respond, we recover, we mitigate, and then we continue doing it all over again. And we address all hazards. So from going from COVID to hurricanes, or preparing for a presidential visit, which we had a couple years ago, to being able to respond to a family assistance center or some sort of terrorist attack that would require a family assistance center. It encompasses the whole community. We have definitely made strides in the last couple of years to reach out to additional community partners and bring them on. So most of our time is spent on the preparedness activity, thankfully. Most people say it's like a 90-10 split. So 90% is preparedness and mitigation activities, and 10% is the response and recovery portion. So with that, we create and update a lot of plans, some of which have come through you all for your approval. Just a short list of some of the ones that you might have seen. Hazard mitigation plan, that's a regional plan that we do with the rest of Hampton Roads. Our radiological plan, which Chief Ash already mentioned. Evacuation Assembly Center plan, that's a subset to the radiological plan. That was a new change. We were sending people to Hampton and to Charles City previously. Now we were able to get the approval from FEMA to write our own plan to send people to War Hill. So we're not sending them out of the county anymore. So that was a huge endeavor, and I'm very thankful for FEMA's acceptance of our new plan. The continuity of operations plan, which we did use, we completed prior to COVID, and then we were able to use during COVID. The emergency operations plan, family assistance center plan, our debris management plan, We have lots of gorgeous trees in James City County, but when a storm blows through, generally we have some debris issues. So we decided that was going to be one of the first plans that we created with General Services help when I arrived. Point of distribution plan, that's so let's say we had a bad hurricane or other sort of event come through and we needed to provide water or food or tarps or something to the community. We have different areas that we have already pre-planned to set up in, and how we would do the traffic flow and where different items would be stationed within that plan in order to make it the smoothest running operation as possible. And then we have our shelter plan as well. Some of these are required by the Code of Virginia, and we need to update them every few years, or sometimes we update them after real-world events, or we conduct what we call an after-action report. So we ask those that participated in whatever plan we used to respond, how did it go, what would you change, or sometimes thankfully we don't have disasters every day. We exercise on a lot of things. So if there was something that came out of an exercise where it was like, we need to change this in the plan, then we make those changes then. So we find an issue, we update or write a plan to fix the issue. We conduct training on the plan. So that's our next thing, is the training and exercise program. Recently, we were able to partner with Anheuser-Busch, and we did a tabletop exercise for a hazmat issue over at their place. We have, prior to COVID, our last one that we did was a pod plan, so the point of distribution plan. We did a tabletop exercise for that as well. We've done several sheltering exercises, and with all these exercises and training, we always come up with something that was like, oh, you know what, we could fix that one thing. So then we go back to changing the plan or updating it. And then the cycle starts all over again. So for some of these plans, plans or exercises or training, depending on how big we want it, we sometimes have to go and ask for additional funds from the state Homeland Security grant program, or use our local emergency management planning grant to conduct some of these training. With that comes the management of those grants. So we do a lot of grant management and writing grants so that we can continue the cycle of creating plans, training, and exercise. We, as I mentioned before, do a lot of community outreach. We're very community outreach oriented. That's something that I personally really enjoy doing, and was one of my goals, was to develop a robust community outreach program. Thankfully, we can partner with several departments, but we partner mostly with Parks and Rec to always get a table either at their Family Fall Festival, or Drool in the Pool is popular for trying to recruit people to our community animal response team. So there's a lot of opportunities in James City County for doing community outreach. Community Emergency Response Teams, CERT. It's a class of, it's 6 classes, and they're about 3 sessions each. People learn useful skills, how to use a fire extinguisher, some basic first aid, how to do team carries if you had to evacuate someone from a building and they were injured, lots of, and just general emergency management preparedness stuff on how you can prepare your family in case something were to happen. So we have a new class starting on October 6th. It's mainly Tuesday and Thursday evenings with 1 or 2 Saturdays, depending on if the person would like a little extra training. There's an extra training day built in there. So if anybody is interested in going or attending that class, they can call our office, which is 757-220-0626, or contact us, and we'll get you set up. We have lots of room in the class. CART, our Community Animal Response Team, that's partnered with our shelters. After Hurricane Katrina, FEMA noticed that a lot of people stayed in their homes because there was not anywhere to bring their pet. They couldn't bring their pet to the shelter. So if I can't bring my pet with me, I'm not going. So the answer to that was post-Katrina Act. Part of it was that jurisdictions should have a plan for how they are going to house animals during a disaster. So our solution was to create this community animal response team. They work inside of our shelter. They're not going out and rescuing animals or anything. Instead, the person would come to the shelter that we designate, and they would bring their animal, preferably in a cage. The person would, our staff member or CART team member would log the person and the animal so that they're connected, and then bring the animal to the dog room, the cat room, the gerbil room, because we separate each one of them. And then the team member would help with making sure the schedule for feeding, walking, cleaning kitty litter is all coordinated, so we don't have 50 people coming back to walk or feed their dog at the same time. So that's really what the community animal response team does for James City County. And we're offering a pet CPR and first aid class on November 19th. It's going to start at 9 a.m. in the morning and go until noon, and people, if they're interested, can call the number that I mentioned before. I've already talked about some of the festivals that we attend. We do community presentations. If anybody wants a presentation on emergency management or preparedness, we're more than happy to do them. And as mentioned before, we participate in Renee's podcast quite frequently. So again, with more day-to-day activities, we participate in the Urban Area Security Initiative. Hampton Roads is very fortunate to be designated as a UASI. On average, Hampton Roads normally gets about $3.2 million a year to help with plans and equipment. Some of the stuff that we have done as a region is completed a complex coordinated terrorist attack plan and done some exercises. That means that we have something going on up here. We have a terrorist incident at one of our, at like Busch Gardens or Jamestown or something, and then Virginia Beach might have something at their ocean front, and then Suffolk has something in their jurisdiction. We need to be able to somehow, as jurisdictions, get together and make sure that we're sharing information so that if it is a coordinated attack, there is information flow going across the community so that we're not operating in silos. With that is the Regional Catastrophic Planning Grant. That came out of the Urban Area Security Initiative program. Currently, the region has a long-term housing group that's creating a plan. And I know our housing team in James City County is part of that work group. Previously mentioned in the other presenter's slide was the community rating system. We do help stormwater with meeting those qualifications. And we're currently a Class 5 rating, and that does give residents a 25% discount on their flood insurance. Part of that is creating partnerships. We used our partnerships a lot during COVID to make sure that we were reaching all residents in James City County and that no needs were being unmet if we could help that. So just some of the governmental agencies we work with: National Park Service, Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, VDEM, the other jurisdictions, VDH, some of the private partners that we work with is Dominion, Busch Gardens, Anheuser-Busch, the hospital systems, which were a huge help with getting us to roll out to help roll out the COVID vaccine and make sure that we were meeting the needs of the residents. Our continuing care communities that we have, and our homeowners associations. And then just some examples of non-governmental organizations that we work with. You all probably know of the Red Cross, but some other lesser known ones that we work with is the Tri-County Pastors Council, Grove Christian Outreach, Williamsburg Community Health Foundation, United Way, Peninsula Agency on Aging. And building those partnerships is very important because one of the sayings in emergency management is you don't want to meet someone for the first time and exchange business cards during a disaster. You want to have those pre-planned meetings already done so that you know the person, so you can call them up and you've had a long-standing relationship during good times with them so that you can make it through some of the rougher ones. We do have an emergency operations center. The goal of the Emergency Operations Center is to break down the natural silos that occur in government to be able to efficiently and effectively respond to the needs of the community. So we have a limited number of resources. Any jurisdiction has a limited number of resources. How best are we going to use those resources when there are competing issues or priorities? And that's what we discuss as a group and get input in from all of the departments participating in our Emergency Operations Center. We also have several trailers. We have the Community Animal Response Team trailer, which has all of our crates and the things that you would need to set up an animal shelter. And that is joint with Williamsburg. We share that and the team with them. We run the program. We have 2 shelter trailers, one of which is on the screen. It's our shelter support unit, which was bought with UASI funds multiple years back and has been super useful. We used that during our COVID response, actually, with some of the privacy screens. And then we have a radiological trailer, which contains all of our portal monitors and the wands that you would use to scan someone to see if they had some radiological contamination. And all that trailer is mobile, and we would bring it up to War Hill. Just a diagram on how we work. Everything begins and ends locally in disasters. If James City County doesn't have a resource or needs some additional help, we can ask the state, so the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. If the state can't handle the request, then they ask the federal government, and then hopefully we get assistance. And so it goes both. You can see the arrows going both ways, but it eventually comes back down again for James City County. At the end, we're the ones living with the disaster the longest, and the goal is to get people back up and running as quickly as possible so that we can have a swift recovery from whatever incident happens to occur. And we do work with our neighboring localities and the non-governmental organizations that I talked about before, and our private partners, which I also mentioned previously. So during recovery, one of the major things that we do is damage assessment. We work with building safety and permits to accomplish this. They are partnered with the treasurer's office, and they go around to the areas that have received damage. It's important that citizens let us know where those areas are, because there might be a pocket somewhere that we just happen to miss. So it's always good if they can let us know if there's an area of damage after a tornado or a hurricane, just so we make sure that we don't miss any of those areas. They use a system called Crisis Track, which allows them to go into the system and say the house has 25% damage. The state has access to that system, and so they can see the damage to James City County right away as we are inputting the information into the system. So it makes recovery hopefully a lot quicker, because there is no lag in paperwork. It used to be you had like 42 hours to get that information up to the state. Now it becomes instant. They still do ask for a paper copy, but it gives us a little bit more time. Also on the recovery end, individual assistance is what people think of if their home got flooded and they get some reimbursement from FEMA for fixing up their home. That is, there isn't any really hard and set fast rule for that. There's some guiding things, depending on how many uninsured homes you have, the population profile that's affected, the community infrastructure, the worse the community infrastructure was damaged, the more likely you might be to get individual assistance, if we had any casualties, and then also if there was a high rate of disaster unemployment for the community, we might be, FEMA might be more apt in a presidential disaster declaration to give us individual assistance. Public assistance, which is for local governments or governments, is we get that more frequently. It's more of a set defined guideline as into what you need to meet it. So for the dollar amount per capita currently is $4.10. So we would need $4.10 of damage per capita in the county. So that equals currently out to $311,731.20. The state also needs to meet a damage threshold, and theirs is currently around 12 million for us to get a presidential disaster declaration, and then to be considered either for individual assistance or for public assistance. Normally, well, it's always a 75-25 split. The federal government will pay for 75%, and the state most of the time splits the 25% with the localities. James City County's cost share would be 10%, and that number is based off of our fiscal stress index, and that's how the state decides if they are going to split the 25% with us, how much they would like us to pay of the 25%. And it's focused on damage to government buildings, damage to parks, any water control facilities that also happened to be damaged.
You know, we get asked following storms about debris management, debris pickup, and how much is FEMA providing. And one of the things that I think is often missed is those damage thresholds that she just talked about. We don't always necessarily qualify for that unless we hit that $311,000 number for us, and then the state also has to hit that before it triggers a lot of those. So kind of back to her earlier slide about all things starting and ending at the local level. Sometimes if a particular neighborhood is hit by a tornado, it's very bad for that neighborhood, and there's a lot of debris and cost, but it might not necessarily qualify to get federal funds, and then we would look for what we can do here locally. So when we talk, a lot of times members of the board have come up to the EOC to visit during some preparation activities in conversations and asked sort of what can the board do, what's the role of the Board of Supervisors during the disaster, and most of you have said, hey, I'm not trying to be in the way, but I want to support and I want to be there and I want to help, and what do we need? And certainly spent a lot of time talking with you all during COVID, and the message was always the same: we're supporting what you're doing, and what can we do? How do we help? So Mr. Stephen and I talked about this, so it was an opportunity to sort of talk about what are the things that we really are looking for during a disaster. Something's hit here and the EOC is activated. What role can the Board of Supervisors play to assist us? And the first is the declaration of local emergency. We have the ability for if it's a planned event, something that we know is coming, we're able to get in front of you by resolution and can do that early. Often it's something that the county administrator or designee is going to sign on the fly, sort of to enter that declaration of local emergency. But that has to be confirmed by the Board of Supervisors either within 45 days or the next regularly scheduled meeting. And we've had a couple of those that we've come to you to confirm, one that we entered into, and some lasted months and months, and some have lasted just a couple of days. I know we did one ahead of the hurricane in 2018 that we thought we were going to get, and then it turned, and so we declared a local emergency and did all this stuff, and then we had to come confirm it in front of you, and then the storm turned, and it wasn't what we expected. And so folks ask sometimes, why do we need to do that? What's the importance of that? And that really frees up the ability to make some purchases, enter into contracts, set aside some of those emergency funding opportunities where we can handle the emergency now and authorize the county administrator to expend those funds, and then we are able to sort of fix on the back end where does that come from. It allows us to hire temporary workers, sort of relieves some of the typical process associated during a local declaration. So when that event triggers that and it gets declared, then Sarah and I pass that up to Virginia Department of Emergency Management. It goes up to the governor's office so that they know we have declared a local emergency and it becomes part of our alert. So that's sort of the formal activity, right? We want to make sure that that's done by the Board of Supervisors. And the other things are to continue the things you do on a daily basis. You're always supportive of our staff, and continuing to do that. Sharing accurate public information. Obviously, you're talking to citizens daily. If it's about Verizon or flooding or tree canopies or any of the other topics we've spoke about tonight, and that's going to be no different during an event, right? And you've already experienced that. And we struggle sometimes to get accurate information and rumors and what's on social media and what's the factual information. And when those citizens reach out to you and businesses owners reach out to you, continuing to push that accurate message out is super important to us. And oftentimes you'll hit a group of people that we may not be able to. Supporting us in implementing the emergency operations plan. Sometimes that's going to be something we need some direct assistance from you, and sometimes it's just recognizing that our folks are out in the field, and you've always done a good job at recognizing general services staff out clearing parking lots and doing debris management, social services out doing shelters, as we've talked about, and continue to support them is important. The other thing we see is during a disaster or planning for a hurricane, there's a lot of conference calls. Sarah and I have one at 3 o'clock that we're going to go to about Hurricane Ian. And sometimes there's also those calls that occur with elected officials, and then there's also calls that occur at the county administrator or chief administrative officer. And sometimes that information is different, right? So making sure that if you hear something, don't necessarily assume that Sarah and I also got it. We may not have all those different channels. Sometimes information is passed directly from the governor's office that elected officials may get, and it takes a little bit of trickle to get to us. So keeping that dialogue open and sharing information, certainly for us, we're going to share as much information as we can through Mr. Stevens to you to keep you up to date on where we are, and being able to, again, get that out to the citizens. So I don't think there's any exact direct action that we need, but we certainly need your support and your continued contact with citizens and businesses and sharing all that public information that Ms. Dahlman or Latara Roush will be out sharing that information. And we're always here ready to adjust for needs. And I think one thing I didn't really touch on is sort of we talked a little bit about the Director of Emergency Management and the Coordinator, but how this sort of works is you serve on our official ICS chart for the EOC. The Board of Supervisors serves as the policy team. And then we have the Director of Emergency Management. I serve as the Coordinator of Emergency Management, and then Sarah is the Deputy Coordinator, but again, really running all the daily operations. So that's sort of the chain of command during an EOC type activation. And we appreciate your support that you've always done, and we'd be happy, Sarah and I both be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Chief Ash, thank you very much for the presentation. Ms. Roush, thank you for your presentation as well, and for congratulations on your new position with the Region 3, the international organization. I think what we've seen from this presentation is that preparedness is a never-ending process, and it is only realized when we do have those emergencies how important that preparation is. But we are very fortunate that we have such a well-staffed and carefully planning organization working for us. Thanks. Any questions or comments?
First of all, thank you for all you do. Could you just please review how folks can sign up for the JCC alerts?
I missed that.
That's okay.
I realized that once I sat down. Yes, so you can go to jccalert.org and sign up, or if you're not a huge fan of the computer and internet, you can also go call the number that I gave, the 757-220-0626, and Michael will be more than happy to register you in the system.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate Mr. Stevens bringing this and you all doing such a great job. This came out, well, I think one of the reasons that it came out was because at our conference this summer, there was a presentation by a Board of Supervisors member from North Carolina, and sort of what happened when there was a natural disaster, and just everything didn't line up quite the way that it did, and how that pulled in the board. So I had a couple of questions. One being, the EOC building is very far from your office. I'm assuming that's because that's where the EOC building was, and then we did the fire administration building.
So that's
Or is
part
that
of it.
purposeful?
So that's part. One of the reasons it's located where it is because it's outside of the 10-mile EPZ.
Okay.
So That's one of the things before. Certainly, that building was the 911 center, emergency communications center, prior to building the new one right next door. And then sort of what's now satellite services at one point was the EOC. So it's been up there for a very long time, back to when emergency management was called civil defense, and it was certainly back some time ago. So one of the challenges that we had was our emergency management staff, prior to Sarah coming on to us in April of 2017, was located up there. The fire administration had been on McClaw Circle and had been we're at Fire Station 3, or then in the building we currently are. And there was a disconnect between our folks. So one of the things we did very early was rearrange some offices and get Sarah, and at the time was Caroline Dunlap, now Michael, moved down to our office to really integrate daily our response. So we go up there, think of the EOC not as office space for them, but really as a as a place we go during an emergency or during training drills to coordinate everyone. So a room that's large enough to do that. But on a daily basis, because we were interacting about meetings and things regularly, having that staff close together was really helpful for us, and I think made our program better.
Right. It's 5 of 3, so I'm trying to be
No worries.
cognizant of that, but,
Michael left. So he's taking care of it.
okay, great. So you brought up about one of the ways that we can help is helping to get accurate information out. So I'm assuming that that would be information that you all would feed to the county administrator, and then he would feed out to us, asking us to get out to channels that we might have.
Yes, ma'am. And I certainly would defer Mr. Stevens to add as well. But we've dealt with it during COVID a lot. We've dealt with it during hurricanes before. There's so much information out there between social media and the news and radio and neighbor tells someone, and a lot of times that has truths in it, and then sometimes it doesn't. So making sure that we're getting the consistent, accurate information out. And I think it's our responsibility in working with our PIO to get that information to you so that we're all speaking from the same piece of music. Because there's going to be citizens who call you directly that don't call us or call up our hotline that we set up because they're used to communicating with you on a daily or weekly basis about other challenges they have. And so it's our job to make sure that we're feeding all that information to you so you have the right answers to tell them on where to go for help and aren't sort of left in the dark, and making sure that we help dispel any rumors. One of the things about our hotline number, internally we call it our rumor control line, because a lot of times that's what it is. And in part of our drills, our human resources staff comes up and staffs that rumor control section to really try to hunt down what are those things that we're hearing. We can tweak our public messaging to make sure it addresses, no, this isn't true, this is true, those types of things.
Okay, thank you very much.
I know y'all short on time. Thank you.
You're fine.
That's it.
Everybody finished? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just make
Yes.
one comment? I will say, I do appreciate Chief Ash and Ms. Rue putting it together, and I will tell you, we're fortunate to have Ms. Rue with us. She is very well thought of in Hampton Roads. I get that all the time. She looks like a nice lady, and she is, until she has us practicing a drill or there's something going on, and then all of us shake in her presence, But I think we are very fortunate. My real message with having her here today is to let you and our residents know that there's a lot of thought and preparedness going on to what could happen and how we'd respond, and it is a coordinated effort. She and her department turn into a significant force by pulling all the county departments together to serve this community when there's an event, from finance to others, to make sure that we can do it. And I really do appreciate the effort of putting it together today. If you have further questions on any of the plans, we can come back and spend a half hour or more on any of those that she mentioned, but I do feel very comfortable that we're set up and well prepared should something happen in James City County. So thank you for that.
Okay, go take that telephone call and keep that storm away. Thank you. We have a couple more presentations and a number of items in closed session. Does anybody want to take a brief break, or are we ready to go through?
5 minutes to go?
5-minute break? Okay. Adjourn for the next order. And we'll move on to our next presentation, which is on a design-build approach for James City County CIP projects. And Sean.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Stevens. I'm here today to brief you on the design-build approach for county CIP projects. First, I wanted to start with the actual design bid build process. That is the traditional, typical process that the county uses to do CIP projects. We go out, we hire the engineer, architect, design firm. The plans are completed, approved. We go through the bid process, and then we hire the contractor. So you have separate contracts for the design team and for the construction team. The engineer, architect, and the contractor have no contractual obligations to one another, and the owner, in this case the county, would bear all the risk for complete contract documents. Under the design build, the owner, the county, would go out and hire a single entity. That would be the design build team to perform both the design and the construction process under a single contract. Under this process, you have more collaboration between the design team and the contractor and subcontractors to get a better design to move forward with the construction. And in this case, the design team bears the risk, and the contractor, the general contractor, is responsible for the delivery. A third delivery approach that I wanted to mention today is the construction manager at risk. This is for larger, complex projects where a construction manager is hired to deliver the project within a guaranteed maximum price, which is based on the construction documents and specs at the time that he's hired. The CMAR provides professional services and acts as a consultant to the owner in the design and construction process. The CMAR must manage and control the construction costs so that he does not exceed the guaranteed maximum price, or they are responsible for the costs that exceed that guaranteed maximum price unless it's through a change order or change in scope. And in a lot of cases with the CMAR, the state dictates procedures for use of this. The CM cannot use his services, more than 10% of his services, so the remaining 90%, which is subcontractors, are competitively bid out. And I believe when we had collaborated with William & Mary recently, and they use this process, but it's on projects that are 26 million and higher. Advantages and disadvantages. Start with the design bid build first. There's more architectural involvement with the owner, competitive bid process. Each person has distinct roles of the team players that come forth with the design process. There's more control over the cost. Disadvantages, extended timelines, late to define budget, team conflicts, lack of product logistics insight, which in the market we have today, that's a big one, and then more change orders potentially. Design build advantages, disadvantages. You have a faster timeline, consistent budgets, owner reduced risk, quality of work, streamlined communication. Disadvantages, it's harder to price shop, it's not as competitively bid, you have a locked-in contract, and you have less creativity, or you can have less creativity. In a lot of cases, it seems like with the design build, you do have more collaboration, and you have the opportunity for more innovation, and that saves on time and money. Here I wanted to compare the two delivery method timelines. As you can see with the design bid build, you work through each task, and before you move forward to the next one, each task has to be completed before you move to the next step. And the actual cost is determined later in the design bid build process after the actual bidding process has been done. Under the design build project timeline, the cost is determined earlier because you have more tasks that are able to be done concurrently instead of waiting for the prior task to be completed. By the numbers for design build, DBIA, the Design Build Institute of America, projects that by 2025 that nearly half of the construction spending will be for design build projects. That's a 34% increase since 2018. It's the highest rated experiences among delivery methods. 77% feedback of very good and excellent. To the right, you can see with the design build process that it outperforms the CMAR and also the traditional design bid build by having lower unit cost, lower cost growth, lower scheduled growth. It produces faster construction speeds and a faster delivery speed. In some cases, from the traditional design bid build, it's 102% faster. Here, I just wanted to show some of the design build projects that are in the region. Y'all may be familiar with the City of Williamsburg fire station that's currently under construction on Boundary Street. They also have solicited for the police station for that work. So you can just go through. It seems like every city of Hampton, city of Virginia Beach, city of Newport News, Charles City, they're all doing projects. As you go through this, you'll see there's a lot of fire stations that are being completed by the design build. Of note on this one, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion. It's a $3.8 billion project. It's one of the largest in the infrastructure projects in the country, and it's also the largest highway construction project in Virginia history. Ahead. Design build, we have experience with this in James City County, past projects. The War Hill artificial turf fields, you'll see the picture of that, Opportunity Way, Legacy Hall, and the Law Enforcement Center. Currently, JCSA has design build projects with the Kings Mill water main replacement that's under construction and the recently completed solicitation of the College Creek water line replacement. Potential design build county projects that we could use this delivery method with is the General Services Headquarters building. It's a complex site. It's a larger scale with significant infrastructure needs. There's the project management. The county would need several contracts in place to be able to get this project completed. It would streamline the process. It would minimize the Board of Supervisors approvals for each individual project. There'd be a lot of contracts that would be over our threshold that you would need to have contract awards on, more so than in the past, probably even with like geotech, commissioning, special inspections, than just your normal architectural, civil, and contractual contracts that you see. And also, it increases performance quality. You're not looking for low bids, so there's the uncertainty of what we get with the low bid process. And with the low bid process under the traditional design bid build, it also increases the probability of change orders. Another project is the marina infrastructure to support the restaurant. It could potentially prevent having two general contractors on the same site at the same time under separate contracts, with minimizing conflicts and fighting over space. It's a single point of contact for the project. You can ensure that the project schedules align for more concurrent completion dates, and the potential for, if you went like a PPEA route, potential for adding funding source for infrastructure and development. That I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon, for that presentation. Anybody have any questions about this?
I'll lead us off. The design build is definitely going to save us in the long run. It's going to save us on staff. It's going to save us on the amount we're spending. We're going to get a better product in the long run. We're going to get a brand new building that more than likely won't leak like the one we have here, as we remember when that got built. So there's, I know a lot of citizens think you need to go with the cheapest contract. That sometimes is not the best contract because they cut it down to the bones. Me being a contractor, I've seen it done many a time and lost bids because of it. They cut it down to the bone and then they come back and nickel and dime you to death. Well, this isn't in here, this isn't in there. And there's contractors that look over this paperwork, especially when we're sitting there responsible for everything. Make sure everything's right. Is the architect right? Is the engineering right? Is everything right on this? And they'll know one or two things. Well, I've got to undercut this. I've got to do this. I've got to change that. That's not going to work. That'll never work. I'm not going to put it in there. I'm going to bid it what they gave me. And then once I get building, then I'll go to Sean and say, Sean, this is not gonna work. I've got to undercut this. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're responsible as a county. And it doesn't, I've never thought it made sense for the county to operate in that direction. And I know everybody's always pushing, you know, get the lowest bid, get this. But the lowest bid, most of the time, is the lowest bid. I mean, it's bare minimum, and you gotta make money. So you're gonna find a way to prop that up and move it forward. And I see it constantly on these bids. You know, when you're doing the design build, you're working as a team, you're starting out. We don't have the responsibility that we have. We're cutting time on projects. We don't have the staff. We can't hire more staff. Nobody can hire more staff right now. And so, you know, it's got a lot of benefit with these projects that we have coming up to start utilizing some of these other items. And I've been pushing it for years, and start utilizing it and start being a little smarter with how we're operating than just, well, we got to take the lowest bid. Well, you know, if we did that with everything we do in the county, what would we have? And we'd have a mess. And we need to start thinking as things operate today and what the current things that are going on and what's happening with these projects and what we're getting. Because if we get a good project that comes out and we don't have to do anything with it, we're better off. We're winning right off because we've got too many other things we're having to do. Then go back to, Sean, go back to that and find another contractor to fix this and do that and make this better. And the water's draining in the building and everybody's irritated, and, you know, because it just wasn't, you know, they had to cut corners. That's how they got the bid. And that's crazy. And we're not spending the money wisely as far as I'm concerned. And the design build, I think, is definitely an area to start pursuing and looking at. And it's going to cut, I mean, Hampton, Mayor Tuck said, I think they cut a year off their time on the aqua thing, that, you know, that just following that direction. And so other jurisdictions are looking at this. So it's not something, because when I first started talking a little bit about it, it was, oh, that's not legal. You can't do that. You're working with one team. No, you're not. And it is legal, and other places have found out that they're wasting money instead of utilizing the money the best they can and getting the project moving and get it finished. So, you know, in a general services building, there's a lot to that. It's not just one that, and working down the marina, you get two contractors together working on the same thing. I can tell you right now, well, he or she's not doing it right, and they don't know what they're doing, and they got the equipment in there. Sean, you're going to owe me some more money because they've blocked everything up. Now I can't work for a week, and it's raining tomorrow, and now I got to pull off, and so I got to charge you to pull off. Then I got to charge you to come back, and I got to charge you because now they're in the way again, and we're just wasting money. And it's just silliness. I think we're coming into the age where this is very important, and money is too tight on everything, that we shouldn't be utilizing this. So that's just my 2 cents. If you need anything more, I got 3 or 4 more cents.
So I put you down as undecided then, Mr. Mitchell? Is that-
I think that was about a nickel's worth, Michael.
One thing I wanted to mention too that would minimize any uncertainty with design build, especially with the vertical construction, is over the years, especially with the general services headquarters buildings, we have developed internally in the department a development guidelines. So we have products and materials that we've kind of standardized that are tried and true and are readily available for operation and maintenance purposes. So that only helps with the development of the OPR, the owner's project requirements. So the more input that you have with that as they develop the basis of design, that only helps when the design build team comes to the table, that they know more specifically what the county's looking for, and that only helps refine the cost up front and know the direction that the county wants to get to meet their ultimate goal.
And then you get the number earlier, rather than waiting and get the number and all of a sudden go, well, we can't afford that. Now we got to go back to drawing board. And we wasted months and months of all this staff time and everything else to come up with a project we can't afford. Now where do we cut? That's when we get in trouble. Because then was like, well, let's cut this. Let's get a lesser product here. Let's get that. Well, in 5 years, we'll upgrade the windows or we'll updo this. And we just, it's throwing good money away for nothing.
With design build, you can lock in a guaranteed price up front that they need to meet as a goal.
All in favor? No.
I think Michael covered it all. I just want to say thank you for a very informative and concise report. Thank you very much. Great presentation.
You guys have anything? Yeah, yeah.
I was just going to add, I thought it was very educational. Very, it sort of laid out for me things that I hadn't thought about before in this process. So I really appreciate the effort that went into it. And I can see that this gives us greater efficiency. I agree, Michael, but I can tell you from my perspective, having spent 20 years riding on an ejection seat built by the low bidder, it's not always the way to go.
No, thank you very much. We're going to get you a better seat.
Don't need it anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon, for the presentation, and
good.
appreciate the opportunity to hear about a different way of going about our construction projects. Thanks. All right, we now move on to a discussion of the government center possible locations. Oh, I'm sorry. No,
We're
I'm
taking
sorry.
that off.
I'm sorry. Short-term rentals.
Okay, Mr. Chair, again, I would like to defer on that. I got a little ahead of Paul Holt in doing that. We do have some information to share. It will be at a future meeting, so I apologize for being here. I'll be back with that on short-term rentals, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Holt to the discussion of the next item to talk about potentially future government center locations.
Come back up, Paul.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to tag team this one here with Jason. He's going to lead us off.
Great. So you'll remember we came before you, Scott and Paul and I, to talk about building consolidation in the spring. At that meeting, we really focused on the decision about what we are going to do in terms of the plan for our facilities, where we know we need to expand, so it's either expand in place or identify a location for a consolidated building or campus-style setting, essentially. So at that point, the board directed Mr. Stevens to work with staff and sort of evaluate what options we had. So really the first thing that we did was have our mapping department put together a map of three things, and it's shown in front of you right now. The blue dot is the geographic center of the county. That's just in terms of, north, south, east, and west. That's the midpoint. You'll notice that's along Long Hill Road. See if I can get this mouse to point. It did a minute ago.
Right at Ford's Colony Drive.
Yeah. But it's not. You know what? I'm going to see this. There we go. The blue dot, that's the geographic center of the county.
No one has purchased a laser pointer. Go ahead. Thank you for the mouse.
The mean center of the county is slightly to the south of that. That's all of the populated areas. So that's all of all residences in the county. This is a little closer to 199, little to the east of that geographic center. And then finally, the center for all of the high populated areas. You can think of this as sort of inside the primary service area where all of our development is. So obviously, since we have more undeveloped area toward the Chickahominy Riverside, it just sort of pushes it to the right a little bit and a little further south. So this really identified the study area that we wanted to look. We wanted a consolidated campus to be able to be accessible to the most number of citizens, the largest population areas. So this is really where Paul and Adam and I started evaluating properties. What we decided to do was we started with properties that the county already owned. We looked at those, and then we identified other undeveloped properties that weren't in the county's ownership, but that were in this area. So we tried to look at a number of different alternatives, and really what we wanted to do is what we wanted to come up with was a test fit on all of those potential sites to see which ones would be able to accommodate that. And you'll remember the county facility needs to be about 150,000 square feet for a consolidated building. I don't want to get into the particulars about which departments and things would be in there, but that's generally the number that we used. And we really just wanted to do some initial investigations of the different sites, like I said, that the county owned, to see if it would be able to accommodate that style of development. So the last bullet point, we're not going to talk too much with you guys today. There were a number of undeveloped properties within that study area. It didn't work out as well as some of the other ones. So we really did focus on 3 areas. War Hill next to the law enforcement center. That's obviously where this started. I'm going to go back to the map and show you where all these are before I kick it over to Paul. The recreation center, you know where the recreation center is on Depew Drive and Long Hill Road. The old water tower site is what we call the woods next to the rec center. And then on the other side of that, there are 2 softball fields and 2 soccer fields. And that's the fields next to the rec center. So let's just go back up. When we're looking at this, War Hill is toward this area here. This is the intersection of 60 and Centerville right here where my mouse cursor is right there. So you can see War Hill's a little to the north of that geographic center. This site here is the old water tower site, the woods of the recreation center, and then obviously the property with the ball fields is right next door. So this one is probably closer to the center of the county than some of the other ones, and we'll talk a little bit about what that test fit looks now.
Cheers already. I haven't even shown my sketch yet. All right, so I had the fun part. I got to draw these things up to start to see what they look like. Again, as Jason alluded to, some of the test fits are really intended more so to see what the building massing does and what a parking field may start to look like. These sketches here before you, they're nothing too pretty or refined. But the important piece of a massing study is that they have the correct scale, which is what all of these have been prepared to. And the overall context is important too. So you'll see on this sketch and the others to follow, we've overlaid these layouts onto aerial photos to show the existing conditions. 3 sites highlighted today, in addition to some of the criteria that Jason mentioned, had to meet several other important criteria as well. He already referenced making use of publicly owned property, making use of publicly owned property that's close to the center of the county, being able to fit the size of that building that we're going to need through 2045. Again, we know that square footage number from the previous completed space needs study, and being able to adequately park that building. By code today, that would mean we would need to provide nearly 300 spaces. Over time, as additional resources are brought on to maintain current levels of service, at a master plan level, that would mean planning for at least 370 parking spaces. Lastly, based on criteria that's also included in that meets all of our other expectations as well, such as avoiding environmentally sensitive areas, providing our typical roadway and landscape buffers, et cetera, just to name a few. So we were able to meet those criteria here by repurposing the existing ball fields at the Community Rec Center. Other pros to this site include the ability to retain the existing playground, making use of the existing topography for stormwater management, and even with a building that would last through 2045, there's still additional room to grow. This layout, as an alternative, can flip-flop as well, with the building located at the top and the future growth area to the south on the soccer fields. Depending on parking needs, the site's interesting too, because you could easily fit a building on both the top and bottom parts of this location, essentially doubling the square footage potential with parking filling in the remainder of the site. Certain cons to this layout will become obvious, especially to those players or parents that actively use those ball fields. Those fields do see a lot of use and would need to be relocated. A less obvious con to this layout would also be the need to redo the existing rec center parking lot to facilitate ingress and egress to especially to the side road there, which is Asbury Lane. Ball field site is less practical if you limit all vehicular traffic heading towards the top of the screen there, which is Long Hill Road. You wouldn't want significantly more cars using the front lane of the rec center, obviously, because at that point there would be conflict with the rec center patrons. If anybody's ever driven this way, you know how frequent it is with people walking to their cars and into and out of the front door of the rec center. The other way through the parking lot, if you were to come down this way and work your way around, is a little problematic too. There's tight angles in there that lead out to the road, but more importantly, how close this other curb cut is to the overall intersection here with Depew. Again, if you've ever come or gone to the rec center through that intersection, you know that's really where vehicles start to slow down a lot and queues start to form. So with this layout, to really make the vehicle path out to Asbury Lane work best, this outer drive aisle should really be relocated and the overall geometry improved. Again, ideally to bring you out a little bit further back from the intersection, gets rid of some of those conflicting turning movements, allows for some of that congestion to ease. The queuing traffic's not so bad there. And then part and parcel to that would be looking to really disconnect the through traffic here because, again, you want to avoid those existing conflicts with the entrance of the rec center. The other interesting site is on the other side of the rec center, the site of the former JCSA water tank. Water tank, as you know, was demolished long ago, but for the existing skate park, the site's otherwise vacant. Intuitively, it doesn't seem like would be enough room there or there's enough land, but this exercise has shown us that there is indeed sufficient room. Enough room, in fact, that it allows for us to develop a master plan that includes a future county office building, parking, possibly even some structured parking, a building pad site for a school administration building, and even a new 350-seat board and commission and/or community meeting room building. Those two amoeba-looking shapes there are where stormwater features could possibly be located. No need to focus too much on that piece right now. Again, these sketches are really rough and were only designed to look at this from at a very high level. For the two sites that seem to check the most boxes, there was certainly a need to vet these sketches to the next level, which we did for this site and for the War Hill site mentioned previously. Jason's going to cover the War Hill property next, and then I'm going to come back to this property after that.
Yeah, so as Paul mentioned, one of the things we like to do is just sort of internally vet some of these concepts, and Paul and I had a really good time sort of sketching out what some of this looked like, but obviously Mr. Stevens was a little bit skeptical on that sort of preliminary back of the envelope style math, so he asked us to go work with some professionals to actually do like I said, what we call a test fit on these two pieces of property. So we started with War Hill, and you'll remember that there was a design that was done in War Hill as a part of the space needs study, where they sort of did a test fit on this area. This is the area that's right below the law enforcement center. You can see the parking at the very top of the screen there. That's the parking for the law enforcement center. It's an undeveloped piece of property, and then on the southern side, it's bound by the easement, the Dominion Electric easement. So we do have sort of a very specific space that we wanted to look at. As Paul said, really what you do is you lay out the parking and then you lay out the building design to see if you can accommodate all that infrastructure. So what we have here is we have a 48,000 square foot floor plate, and we have a 4-story building. So that's the large building here in the corner. That would be the main county complex. It becomes sort of the focal point of the area as you're driving along Opportunity Way. He had mentioned that there might be the ability to have a specific boardroom that we could share. That's that little building that's sort of attached to the end here that could also be used. There would be some good synergy with a school administration building that might be able to go on this property as well. So really what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, okay, we know everything that might go on this site. What would it look like? So there, as Paul said, there are lots of sort of pros and cons to this style development. There is a lot of synergy. This is in an area where there are other county facilities, obviously the law enforcement center, War Hill being, you know, the sports complex around it, and then some of the school facilities as well, Virginia Peninsula Community College and War Hill High School are in the area as well. So there's a lot of infrastructure already in the area. We've talked about some of the cons already, right? That first slide. This is a little more northern than the center of the community. It's located adjacent to 199, but you have to get onto other roads before you can get there, right? Make a left or a right onto 60 and then a left onto Centerville. So transportation can be a little bit challenging. And I think you would hear, as Paul said, from some of the sports parents, it can be kind of difficult if you need to get out during some of the higher usage times when you have some of those tournaments and games. But this is obviously a site that we wanted to evaluate, and this is what that potentially could look like. So before we get into the rec center site, I just wanted to point out a couple things. Paul had mentioned that we try to look at some of the environmental aspects of a site. Really, that dark tree line is where the resource protection area is. So there isn't a lot of expansion opportunity on this piece of property. We do have 600 parking spaces that could fit here. It also shows potentially a two-story parking garage if that was something we were interested in. And there's a little bit of room here on the back side to expand if we needed additional buildings or things of that nature. So there is some expansion opportunity on here as well.
Back up this next slide. So I'll just pull on what Jason started. I so very much appreciate Mr. Stevens' confidence in my sketch drawing ability, but when he suggested we take some of these to the next level, I was the first one to agree with him. Can make a lot of stuff work with a fat Sharpie. So this is a good exercise for sure. So certainly at the War Hill site, as Jason just mentioned, we did a more refined sketch, and we did that here as well on the former water tank site. So at this more refined level, you know, this site is located centrally and provides close access to Route 199, provides us with the building necessary to meet projected needs into the future. With the addition of the other buildings and uses, and when combined with the rec center, this master plan could serve more as a central county complex versus a single county office building on a single site. By co-locating these uses, additional land for these uses would not have to be located in the future. And a really sort of interesting aspect about this plan and this site is that it provides significantly more parking. A lot of times people think, especially when you have big meetings, that you know, a more conservative parking field, you may be underparked. But even with these additional uses, this site can accommodate up to 645 parking spaces just on this property alone. That's a 75% increase over that needed for just the county building by itself. At a master plan level, this location and layout can be very walkable. You'll see some of those existing sidewalks, and there's an existing extensive existing walking trail out there already. So therefore, this layout can also leverage overflow parking whenever needed that exists with the parking lot that already exists at the rec center. That parking lot has 315 parking spaces. So the total parking shown here, when you take everything into consideration, totals somewhere in between 900 and 1,000 parking spaces. Certainly that's enough to carry us forward into the future. With a broader complex master plan, residents can do more with a single trip, and this site is located on an existing water route with a bus stop already located here by the community rec room, by the community meeting rooms here at this end of the rec center. Indeed, all of these sites, this layout does appear to check most of the boxes on needs and even allows for some additional uses and growth on the property beyond a single-use building located on a single site. Probably the one con associated with this site would certainly, as you've seen, would be the need to relocate the skate park, certainly. Haven't been able to come up with too many other cons on this specific property, though. And one final thought as it pertains to the need to any more future growth beyond this concept. With a broader complex master plan, not only do you have this wood site and the current rec center property, this exercise has also shown that there could even be more growth accommodated in the future with the repurposing of the ball fields, because we now know that side can accommodate buildings and parking as well. That would really add to the central campus theme. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Stevens for any next steps and final thoughts.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think for us, we'll look through, again, probably 5 or 6 sites. These two make the most sense to us as your staff. I think that is the next big step for us to decide where do you want to go, and I know you've had a lot of conversation about that. We believe these 2 sites are good for a lot of reasons, and if we make that selection, then we'd be back to, as Jason said, what do we actually put in the building? And so we've got pretty significant square footage there. The layout shown is just for test fit purposes, so we're not into this building here and this building there. We can move that around on the site as we work with you going forward. It's just getting us to that site so we can go to the next step. So if you have questions, we'd be happy to try to address those at this time.
I did have a question. I know you don't want to nitpick now, but I will tell you that I think having a separate community that you'd had to send staff out in the elements I like the idea of a meeting room, but yes. Why the school admin building separately and cost-wise? I mean, that's 2 fairly large buildings.
Yeah, so I think as Mr. Stevens said, there's a couple different ways to approach this. There's obviously the cost and the design aspect. I think when Paul and I were just sort of envisioning this, we wanted to create that sense of place, that this was a campus and that this was sort of the destination. So having that building separate and on the corner draws that whole line of Depew Drive and sort of makes it sort of a row of buildings so it looks, I'm trying to think of the word I want to say.
You know, architecturally, what it does, it breaks down some of the massing, right? So we sort of talk about the county office building in order to fit that much square footage, you know, being possibly a 4-story building. And so the idea with the school admin building, which is proposed to be 2 stories, you don't put one giant massive building sort of there at the end. You're able to break that up. Also, it would afford you some opportunity potentially for phasing or for bringing different things online at different times, should you want to retain that flexibility and approach. You know, again, a lot of this is just a test fit on massing. You know, certainly from an architectural detail point of view, it's kind of hard to pick up with this. Those are covered walkways that lead to the building room. And again, you know, could help with, say, let's say you want to, you know, have a board meeting or the planning commission meeting, but then the other nights of the month, the community, the demand from the community is enough to make full use of that building. You know, certainly having that standalone and not integrated into your larger county office building, there's some pros and cons at that very next detail level as well. You know, again, to the degree that one meeting room could also be used by the school board, in addition to the county board of supervisors for meetings and also for boards and commission members. Just allows for some of that separation. But again, I think those are just some details at a different scale, just to kind of help break that up a little bit.
Can you tell me what's played on the soccer is on the fields on the other side?
And we know softball, it might be Lafayette. I think it's one of the schools plays softball on that.
And how far are we on softball out at the Whisk?
Yeah, it's certainly in the CIP, and obviously if we had to do something on this site, even more could be added to that to make sure we accommodate it.
Yeah, so I'm not in favor of is that what you're asking today, what we're in favor of? Or what are you asking for before
I think for today, location, is the rec center wood site or the LEC a preferred site of the board? Recognizing the initial, if you did something on the wood site, that really doesn't have an impact on the fields today. That's your future expansion. If the county needs something in 30 or 40 years, there's a space. It doesn't mean you would expand there, but it certainly gives the county an option where we haven't put you in a place that you have to look for another site. So that generated at least a little more interest in this site for me. When you talk about the buildings, we have a lot of discussion of, is it one building, are they together? One thing I will share, the architects have shared that a room like this that has vaulted ceiling and lot of span is expensive to build on top of. So while it may look like a 2 or 3 story building from the outside, you don't want to build more building on top of it because it's more expensive to do. So I would see a future board meeting room, unless it's on the top floor of your building and then you've got everybody using an elevator, you would probably have it on a ground level and probably a freestanding building. Whether a school administration is connected to the building we're in and create a larger massed building or whether it's separate, I think those are points we could debate later. But I'm like you, they should be connected. It ought to be weatherproof so that I don't have to worry about walking in and out of the rain, or safety wise where you have people in night meetings that they don't have to be out in the parking lot traipsing from one building to another as we currently do. So I think those are all good comments and things that we would take into consideration on the design side.
What you're saying with this is that initially, we would not be touching the ball fields.
Right.
That's
Correct.
just long-term
Correct.
if we need them. So for now, using this,
Woods.
the woods, the ball fields are okay for now.
Right.
Okay.
And Mr. Holt did mention the skate park. In talking with our Parks and Recreation Director, the skate park there today is something that you wouldn't build that way today. And he would tell you that the current design for skate parks is a different design. And so he would be of the opinion we would relocate that somewhere so we wouldn't not have a skate park. It just wouldn't be at that location, may or may not be at this site, but it would be a different design, a current adaptation to what the skate parks are seeing today. So yes, we'd lose the amenity on that corner, but it would be replaced somewhere within our park system, or at least that's our plan. So we're asking today this site or the law enforcement center site, and then we'd have more conversation with you in terms of the
What
specifics.
it looks like and how it's connected and those details. We can do those on either site, but
Let me go back to the other site by the LEC. Isn't that the site that was currently originally proposed for the Fire Station 6,
That's down further.
or is it?
Yeah, that was shown on the space needs study diagram that we did. It's not that it couldn't fit here. Like I said, there is that undeveloped area over here where we might still be able to put it. But there's also other undeveloped area in War Hill that
Okay,
might
no,
make more sense.
But what I was saying, driving at is that the bottom part, the road down there along the bottom, that's actually at the power line right away, correct?
That's the power line,
So,
yep,
so that
correct.
prior to this, the Fire Station 6 was in this particular area.
That's correct.
So that if we did this, we would have to put Fire Station 6 somewhere else. Okay, that
But we're looking at Fire Station 6 to be below it anyhow, with this design. That would be there anyhow, so it's already a space
you
there.
would have to go beyond the power station
Right.
right away, and then down into the ball field area.
Down right past the power line area.
Okay.
And then, now there were a couple comments, and I'm still stuck on War Hill, but y'all know that anyhow, so they ain't nothing new. Getting in and out, both sites had the same issue of getting in and out. We're limited to a certain point, but everything does, and you build it and you make it bigger. Now, we've got it in our plan to take that road, we've got $5 million in the budget to extend that road, the temporary road, and make that a full road. So that's
Which road are
already
you talking about? Which,
the little road that goes by all the ball fields and everything that, we opened up that wasn't
over by
that.
the Whisk?
Yeah,
So we would improve that?
that road's
brings you up-
we've already got 5 million slated to improve that road.
To bring you
That
out to
would be a
Long
good
Hill
thing.
Road?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's already in the budget and the CIP down the road. So we're already, so we got a road there.
Well, what about the
And-
road that's right here that runs by the LEC in itself? You get War Hill High School traffic going in through there, and then the Whisk traffic and Parks and Rec traffic, even that road, is that going to be expanded as well? Because I drive through
Yeah,
there every day.
I do too. I got 2 kids in the school there.
I go from the top, from 199 all the way to Long Hill, cutting through there.
But, when you, so there's difficulty on both sites. And it just depends on when you go out. It's a matter of fact. Either one of them can get you to 199, One can get you to interstate and 199. The other can get you to 199 a little bit further down, past this site to get to the interstate. So those two things we have that we'll have to address down the road. We do have money for that other exit, the 5 million slated for that. This site here, as far as the War Hill site, you know, with the buildings being spread out on both sites, every corner of this building is a cost. And I know we're not talking about buildings, we're talking about sites. But every corner, I'll tell you right now, I know it is a fact, I do it, is a cost. The more you put into one building and take from the other. Now, I know that if we take away, even if we say in the future, we may take away your ball fields. I'm not talking to them parents. I can tell you one thing, we don't have enough ball fields as it is. And now we're thinking, well, maybe we'll use a site and then later we can use the ball fields. This one, we don't have to use the ball fields. We don't interrupt any of that. So as far as parents and ball fields, I don't want to get in between those at all. You know, the fact to condense this to work this will work. The amount of parking is about equal on both sites. We do have the overflow of the rec center, but we don't have enough parking for the rec center as it is when it's going. So really, I take that parking off the table, because even in the evenings, there's a lot of people use that rec center. That rec center is a wonderful thing, and it's used by a lot of people. So I kind of go, well, I'm taking that section of parking out of there. Probably will get more parking from during the day from people at rec center parking over at the new facility, so they're not having to jam up where they are. I just think the war, and now, is it centrally located? Well, almost. It's about the same distance if you measure from one to the other across from the central location. So you're almost equal in distance. But the thing about it is the county's growing that way more than it's growing the other way. So there'll be more eventually as we get older, and 20 years from now, there's going to be more up Sue in my area that we're going to have coming in. So, you know, that's another side of the equation for me. School administration ought to be in there, ought to be connected. I'd like to see a central library in the building so that people will have a nice library there. You know, there's a lot we can do in the building. I know we're not talking about the building, we're just talking about sites. So as y'all know, I'm not surprising you. I would have to go with Ward. But it's a 5 vote, so I just had to give my best.
It's a noble effort.
So to your point about the parking over at the rec center, how would you keep rec center parking out of the government center parking? Because it is going to,
they'll
it's going to
share.
bleed over.
They'll both share.
Yeah, they'll just share.
Hey, Sue, I can answer that question for you.
And not one.
You're not.
No, I can answer that question very simply. Right now at the rec center, there's plenty of parking. It's just, how far are you going to walk? And when you're my age, I don't want to park all the way at the end of the lot and walk all the way up there.
Exactly.
Now, there's parking there. So the young folks, you know, who don't mind hoofing it for that length of distance, they'll do it. If I were going to have to use the rec center, there's no way I'd park across the street. I'm going to come in and I'm going to be like one of those people who sit there 30 minutes hawking for one spot closer just to make sure I don't have to walk quite as far. And it sounds to me like what we have is we basically have two viable options for sites that are currently owned by the county. And what we need is we need to decide if we want to press on it. I mean, we could potentially have a site in the Eastern State property. You could have potentially other sites that you could probably purchase, but the problem is those aren't in hand right now. And what this gives us the ability to do is, if we want to start the process, is we can decide and we can start the process sooner rather than later. Exactly. And so I personally think that you know, I can see the benefits of both. I prefer the Woods site here because of the fact that I think it is a little more easily accessible for 199. I think it's not too bad right now, either one of these, for heavy traffic, although if you put this in here, I think you're gonna have to do some road improvements on Depew, about Eastern State, you know, turn lanes and some additional stuff. But I think that the accessibility for the public, and the details of whether what you're gonna put into it, if we wanna put a library in there or whatever, that's later. But, and you can always have the fight about ball fields at a later time, because you leave the ball fields the way they are right now, but you have that expansion capability within a complex that I think is fairly easy. I would note that there's a big piece of property right across the way there, and there's also some down here in Eastern State that would be very close proximity that we may have access to at some time or another if we decide we want to buy some more property or get some more property. So I would lean toward the rec center.
That's 2 for War Hill.
So there's money in the hopper for road work by War Hill, but there's not for the rec center area,
And Ms.
correct?
Sadler, the Parks and Rec has a plan for a future road to connect through War Hill. I mean, that's a problem today within that site.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe it's in your 5-year CIP, but it is an identified need within the Parks and Rec, and it is a $5 million number that we have estimated that to cost to have that road. This building,
But
if
there's nothing there for the rec center woods.
there is not at this point in terms of road
Okay.
expansions. It would be anything that we would do or require would be part of the project cost, and again, we've not developed those more fully.
And just to clarify, it would bring the traffic to Long Hill,
Correct.
which is not expanded yet. And so it would.
One other aspect I
Two-lane
think
road there.
we need to look at is that Eastern State, when it does get back to us and somebody wants to develop that, part of that development process is going to be transportation along this corridor here, because this is a very large portion of the frontage of Eastern State. So it's not like we would be doing any road necessarily all by ourselves, because we wouldn't be the only ones impacting it.
It pains me to go against my colleague, Mr. Hippel.
I thought you were talking about Jim.
But I too prefer the Woods site. What I do like about the War Hill is I like having the law enforcement center next door, frankly. You know, for safety. That's tough to give up, because I think our employees are vulnerable. And I think those that serve on commissions and boards can be vulnerable as well. And so realizing that our police officers are on the road versus staying in the law enforcement center, and we'll be able to get to any site that we go to. But that's a plus to me. I know you don't want to get into the nitty gritty, but I'm going to take this opportunity. I would prefer to see that school building be a library as well. I would prefer that the school system be in the other maybe it doesn't work because it's too tall or whatever. But I also think that we need to have a discussion with the school system to see if they're willing to come over. If they're not, this is an opportunity, whether this is in 3, 5, whatever. If they're not willing to come over when we're ready to build, then I think they're going to, that's a different discussion. Then, they'll need to find some space somewhere else, because we need to make some plans.
Yeah, and I did just want to add, because you had brought that up earlier. This actually is sort of over-programmed. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but I had said that the building would need to be about 150,000 square feet. We have 4 48,000 square foot plate levels, so that's actually 190,000. So that building would be able to accommodate either a library or a school administration building in that.
Or could you do both? Could you do a library on the bottom floor and do school administration on the top floor?
Absolutely, and given the conversation that we had.
Which building are you talking about?
School.
So the
Right
school,
here on the
school.
woods?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The school
bottom?
admin building is
Right
here,
there. Okay.
and that's 2 30,000 square foot floors, so 60,000 total. This one is 48,000 square feet with 4 floors. So it's all about the same. It's just how you how you link them.
Right, and I realize, and I'm just want to take this opportunity to just make sure, because it sounds like if you get a site, that you're gonna start moving a little bit. And so I think it's an important discussion to have with school administration to find out where they are in this process. Because I did hear a little bit of feedback, or they may not be willing to go to such, so if they're not willing to go somewhere, that's fine. But once we've made the decision about where we're going, and at some point. And so, we hope they'd want to come along, but if not, then they need to probably start planning something differently for their admin building when they're ready.
And Ms. Larson, I think I had had conversations with the superintendent. I haven't spoken specifically about this site, but in conversations I had with her, it was about location for them. And certainly either site, if we get to a site decision, we would encourage that and see where they are. I don't know how you would object to the rec center site in proximity to where they are now and serving their student population. The other site is not bad either, central to most of the population. But I would have that conversation with them pretty quickly. And I think that they would be on board with that, but we would need to verify and confirm.
It's certainly part and parcel of this design, and the square footage that's been built into that county office building per se, again, was really just more designed to provide the board with a sense of flexibility and additional square footage so that we just don't end up moving in somewhere, whether it's here or War Hill, and then get boxed in. So, this site and the other one, so that you're sort of comparing apples to apples, you're showing a 4-story office building. Could be that just for county needs, you may need something less than 3, but certainly the incremental cost of putting on another floor versus constructing a whole nother building for a different use, again, you can start to understand some flexibility there. And a little bit of, again, sort of tangent into the details. So certainly better understanding what traffic is going to do on both Long Hill and Depew, and at those intersections are very important. I think it's been conveyed already that development of the Eastern State site, that master plan and that traffic study will be in, we are expecting maybe around the turn of the calendar year. And, that master plan and that transportation study will already be looking at these 2 roads and these intersections, as well as the intersection of Long Hill and 199. So I think as part of that analysis, it should be relatively straightforward to understand at a macro level what all is going to be going on with traffic, how is it going to work, what the cross-section of Depew will ultimately look like, what the intersection with Long Hill will look like, and again, with the effort to make sure with whatever is decided here today that all that works. Certainly having a decision on a location will better help inform those processes if they move forward together as well.
But either side allows for growth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not as boxed in here, because we sort of on the War Hill site, we're boxed in a little bit with the RPA on this side and the power line easement on this side. We've got some room here.
Paul, how many acres is on this site and how many acres on the other site? Because I believe this site is bigger than the woods. So it's just the layout more than the actual ability to use the site.
Yeah, and I'll note too, we haven't figured out necessarily stormwater on this one. On the other plan, we've shown some opportunity for where those surface BMPs will go, because that one's a whole lot more flat than the topo on this one. I think even the 2 surface ones on the other one may not get 100% of it, but certainly we would need some time to figure out the remaining developable once we figure out stormwater as well.
But our biggest thing tonight is we just want to pick a site so we can get moving.
And then help to
So let's
figure
pick
out
a
whatever
site.
those next set of details really
Whether I
are.
win or not, let's pick a site. Let's get it done tonight.
And both of them are about 10 acres, give or take.
Amen. So where are we? Ms. Sadler, do you have a preferred
So
site?
I think everybody's got good points. I didn't even think about your point with the law enforcement center being next door. I think that's kind of crucial. There is predominant growth whatever growth's going to take place is going to be up our end of the county. I could go either way. I don't really care, but I don't know. I'm just kind of, I'll pick Ward Hill. I don't care.
Mr. Eisenhower?
I'd stay with the water tower side.
War Hill.
Water towers.
Ward Towers.
The
The Ward Towers.
I assume what you're saying is the rec center woods.
Yeah, he wants a rec center.
And I will tell you, that, for almost, I think for everybody else, your constituents will be closer to the government center than they are now. My constituents will be farther away, and the majority of my constituents will be farther away from the government center, which either of the two locations you select, but they'll be much farther away at the War Hill site.
But they've
War Hill
had it
sites.
good for up to this point.
They
had a good run. I mean,
Yeah, they have been the
we've been
closest.
hauling for
I-
All the
years.
rest of us had to
They
solve
didn't-
that
That
part,
argument-
you know?
They didn't
Uncle
make
John's
that
there.
decision. They didn't make that decision. And I do think that a critical point Mr. Eisenhower, I think, just made is the idea that we know that there will be development on the other side of this, and we can plan that to lessen the sort of traffic impacts that would occur on the wood side. So I'd be for the wood side as well.
There you go. We picked a site.
There we go. Let's
Let's
roll.
move.
Very good. Well, I appreciate the conversation and discussion. We'll have more for you in the coming months, so.
I'm ready to move in. Be a lot closer than where it is
It'll
now.
be nice. It's gonna be nice. I'm gonna be part of that. It's gonna be nice.
He's on the committee for sure.
You have fun with that one.
That's right.
Okay, so that brings us
Lord have mercy.
through our presentation, our board discussions, and now we have no board considerations today. We have board requests and directives. Who'd like to?
Pass.
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 I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm just going to make two quick ones. One, I just wanted to mention that I attended 2 sessions last week on Project Pipeline, 2 opportunities for citizens to understand a little better. I know Ms. Larson and Mr. Eisenhower were at the one on Monday evening at Laurel Lane Elementary School. I also attended the one in the city on Tuesday at noon. There were about 100 people at the evening session, about 30 people at the city session, and I want to commend VDOT for making the information more understandable this time around when the presentation was made. And it'll be interesting to see what people's comments are about the proposals. The 3 recommended proposals would have a combined cost of $36 million and would have an impact, I believe, of something like 8 reductions in traffic accidents per year. So lots to consider there, and lots of ideas. If you wish to comment for this round, the comment period is open until this Friday, at the end of the day Friday, and we have information on the county's website, as well as VDOT has a project pipeline website, and that information is available again through the county website, and you can leave comments about your perspective on the proposals that are out there. The other thing I did want to mention is I was saddened to hear on the weekend that a former member of this board, John Donaldson, passed away unexpectedly on Wednesday of this past week. John served 2 terms as the Jamestown District Representative on the Board of Supervisors, and was a longtime faculty member at the Marshall With Law School at the time, and will certainly leave behind a legacy of very thoughtful and reasoned contributions to county governance at a time when we were experiencing the very early growing pains of our expansion in population and economic activity, and certainly can feel that he has a lot to be proud of in his career, and I hope his family will recognize that as they put him to rest. So, thanks.
All around good guy too. A very good man.
Yeah, very good man.
Well done.
And that's it for me. And now the report of the county administrator.
Chair, members of the board, I do have a couple items I'd like to share with you. First, I would like to thank you for your approval of our Operation Greenlight for Veterans. That is a National Association of Counties initiative. Our state association, VACO, supports that as well. And it does ask us to light up community buildings and some of our citizens to take some effort to maybe do some green lighting around their homes from November 7th to 13th. So we'll work on promoting that. We have test fit our courthouse. It looks really pretty and green at night. And again, we'll have it lit up November 7th to the 13th. So thank you for that. It is to be in honor of our veterans, those who have served and those who currently serve. So I'm excited that we're moving forward with that. Also want to mention our vote center. It did open last week at 4095 Ironbound Road, the building behind the courthouse. Hours are 8 to 5 Monday through Friday through November 4th, and it will be open Saturday, October 29th and November 5th, 8 to 5. And so I hope folks that are interested in voting early will go by the center and certainly share their feedback with us as they move through that. But it seemed to operate well Friday, and so look forward to the coming weeks of what that carries for us. And then we are holding some public outreach, one of our community conversation series this Thursday, September 29th, 6 o'clock p.m. at the James City County Recreation Center. We're going to have a police overview of just crime statistics and things going on in the community so folks can be on the lookout of how to make their homes or their area safer. We'll have some conversation about the government center, the need that we had talked about last May, and I guess your decision or direction here this evening on where it likely will end up. And then we're going to also talk about a trash consolidated waste disposal discussion that we had with you and just see if we have any additional community feedback on that. One other item I would share with you, we have had conversations with our police department in terms of survey and morale and staffing and some of those things. We are short officers. That it is creating some additional stress on our officers there. We're working through some communication and other issues. The chief and I held 2 meetings with officers today. We have a number of other meetings later this week and into early next week. But I am very encouraged by our officer participation, by them being very frank, forthright, and certainly we all have the same goal in mind of getting it staffed up, making the morale in the department better, and we've got a few months of work to do. So I'll have more to share with you as we go forward, but I do appreciate your support on all those activities, and we'll keep you updated with the police department as we move forward. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And we need a motion to go into a closed session for the following items: discussion or consideration of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of a public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia, and pertaining to the property located at 2205 Jamestown Road. Secondly, discussion concerning the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, plus discussion of a personnel matter and the appointment of individuals to county boards and/or commissions pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, specifically appointment to the Agricultural Forestal District Advisory Committee, appointment to the Clean County Commission, appointment to the Social Services Advisory Board. So we need a motion for all those items. We have a motion to approve. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye. Go to meeting back to order, and I look for a motion to certify the closed session.
Chair, I certify that we only spoke about those matters that we said we would.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we have a couple of appointments to make. Mr. Eisenhower?
Okay, you want to make them individually, or could you all three and vote one time? What's appropriate? Okay, Mr.
I
Turner?
think we can do all
All
three.
three is fine.
All three. Okay, we will, appointments of Mr. David Hoag and Mr. Jason Knight to the AFD, Agricultural and Forestry District Committee, for a term to expire on the 30th of September 2027. We'll be looking to appoint Ms. Jennifer Pye to the term on the Clean County Commission that expires at the vacated, she's filling the balance of a term that will expire on the 31st of May 2023. And we're going to reappoint Mrs. Karen Davis to the Social Services Advisory Board for a term that will expire on September 25th, 2026.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I look for a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on October 11th.
Motion?
We have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Hippel? Ms. Larson? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Oh, Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan,
Aye.
sorry.
Meeting adjourned.